Just a quick logistical announcement. The colleagues will go through the room to give you the nameplates. So please just tell them which country organization you're from so that you can get your sign, if you don't have it. I also just have another kind request that at the front table, at the head table, if we can just have one representative from a delegation, because we're tight on space and it would be good to have as many people sitting in a table if possible. Thank you so much.
There's a chair here.
I only read over the reflection of the end, right?
Yeah, but if you want to speak, so you can, huh? Just raise the flag.
Okay.
It's up to you, huh?
Yeah.
Marcus, I think you just have to squeeze in.
Yeah. Can we just ask everybody to take their seats? We know it's tight, and apologies for that, but we are troubleshooting, as you know, so that we can start. And if you don't have your country flag, the colleagues are here. They can help you out. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon to everyone. Excellent ladies and gentlemen. I hope you have a pleasant lunch. I declare the session of the afternoon open. I am Rafael Gómez del Giudice, Vice Minister of Energy of Dominican Republic. And I would like to start by thanking to the President of the Assembly for inviting me to preside over this Ministerial Roundtable. I now invite the Assembly to turn to Agenda Item 12, Ministerial Roundtable of Geopolitics of Energy Security. The Assembly has before it background document with the same title, contained in 8/14/BN/3. This ministerial meeting will be guided by IRENA, upcoming report in the series of the Geopolitics of Energy Transition, offering a new perspective on the changing face of energy security. This report will be shed light on the broad implication of the shift to renewable of energy security, notably in fashion geopolitical dynamics, transforming traditional energy trade routes and emerging infrastructure. Again, the backdrop of the climate change. Central of this discussion will be on examination of the evolving pattern of energy trade as the world pivot away from the fossil fuel toward renewable energy. Additionally, the dialogue will be delved into the emergence and significance of the new infrastructure tailored to support renewable energy systems and their connection with the geopolitical landscape. Historically, dominated by the geopolitics of fossil fuel trade on infrastructure. This discussion I am to offer the deepest understanding of how renewable energy is not only dispatching energy system but also redefining energy security on the global geopolitical equation. I now invite His Excellency Mr. Han Olaf Albrecht, Special Envoy of Climate and Security of Minister of Foreign Affairs of Norway, to deliver his opening remarks. Excellent. You have the floor.
Thank you, Minister. The issue that we will be discussing here today will actually, in my view, make or break the energy transition. I could sort of summarize it, and the top-line message for our discussion, I think, will be that geopolitics of energy are actually alive and kicking and doing quite well these days. Energy issues, energy security, energy poverty, and just transition are now at the top of the international agenda. And this surge in attention is largely due to the ongoing fuel, food, fertilizer, and financial crisis compounded by Russia's war on Ukraine. This comes on the back of the COVID-19 pandemic. As a result of this, we see increasing volatility in energy markets, increasing debt levels, and major geopolitical shifts, including fragmentation and increasing global distrust. The global energy transformation is a major geopolitical force, and it will actually reconfigure many elements of international politics that have shaped the global system since the Second World War. So this will affect the sources of national power, the process of globalization, relations among great powers. It will create new dependencies, and also it will affect the ongoing economic convergence of developed and developing countries. Trade, once seen as a cornerstone of international relations, is increasingly viewed as a potential strategic vulnerability and liability in an increasingly polarized world. Countries are now also reconsidering traditional energy partnerships, diversifying their energy portfolios and investing more in renewable energy. And renewables are now positioned as the backbone of energy security, that we'll hear more about later in this discussion. And far from fostering cooperation, this will likely produce new forms of competition and possibly also confrontation, long before, as we diplomats strive for, a more peaceful and just world. And maybe I would like to add, maybe a more boring world, and today's energy world is definitely not boring. The global energy transition is accelerating, although unevenly, and we've also heard this in our discussions at the Assembly earlier today. Investments are lagging in many developing countries, leaving actually many countries further behind in this transition. Reaching SDG 7 by 2030 will be a tall order, so we really need to roll up our sleeves in order to meet the targets that we've set. Colleagues, a key question to us as energy professionals is how will these geopolitical shifts affect the energy transition? I'm extremely pleased that IRENA, as the leading global intergovernmental agency for energy transformation, has taken on this issue. IRENA, supported by good colleagues from Germany and the United States and from Norway, we created in 2018 an independent global commission to assess the geopolitical consequences of the global energy transformation. The commission, chaired by former President of Iceland, Ólafur Grímsson, presented its report in January 2019. If you haven't read it, please look it up and start reading it. The report was the first comprehensive assessment, and it actually spurred a lot of interest. And I think actually this report also helped us to start filling a library that has been, I would say, almost empty when it comes to the geopolitics of renewables. We've had a lot of books and articles on the geopolitics of fossil fuel, but very little on the geopolitics of renewables. As a result of this, IRENA has set up a work stream. This includes a collaborative platform of the geopolitics of the energy transformation, which is currently co-led by Namibia and Norway. The platform works to provide a deeper understanding of the issues of common interest to members. IRENA has also undertaken analytical deep dives, one on minerals and one on hydrogen. I also recommend you to take a look at those reports. They are sitting on the IRENA website, so please read them. And I think you can even, and one on minerals. I said minerals, sorry. And I think you can pick up the minerals report just outside here. And today, IRENA is launching a report on energy security. And we will hear more about the report in our discussion. As part of the approved work program, IRENA also intends to establish a new commission, what I call Grímsson 2.0, as I call it, to update the work on geopolitics. Colleagues, it's quite clear that the transition to net zero will be turbulent. We need to grapple with the geopolitics of fossil fuel, which has dominated discussion so far, and at the same time deal with the geopolitics of renewables. So the old and the new energy systems will actually overlap, and the transition will also play differently in various contexts. And this will, of course, carry geopolitical risks. Most of these risks are not routinely accounted for by governments and businesses within strategic planning and decision-making. And these risks, if they play out in the wrong manner, could lead to instability or even conflict in certain geographies. So geopolitical dynamics will influence the transition away from fossil fuels that we all agreed to at COP28. And let me also underscore this. There will be winners and losers in this transition. Not all of us will be winners. But at the same time, this transition will also provide opportunities. If you allow me to paraphrase President Clinton, I would argue that actually it's the political economy stupid. I think he said the economy is stupid when he won the election. But the political economy of energy matters. In closing, the fact that the clean energy transition will be messy and create new geopolitical risks is not an argument for inaction. Quite the contrary. Approaching the clean energy transition with a clear-eyed understanding of the risks is essential to tackling the climate crisis. And IRENA, with its thought leadership, enhances our understanding to do so. Let me thank, in particular, if you allow me, Francisco, to thank Elizabeth Press and her team for leading these efforts. So keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your remark. would love now to invite the Director General to deliver his opening remark. Excellent. You have the floor.
Thank you, Vice President. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to briefly address you at this ministerial discussion on the geopolitics of energy security. Energy security is a topic that until now has not been discussed in the IRENA setting. Last year, the Assembly included this important area in IRENA's mission for the strategic cycle, recognizing the systemic impact of the shift to renewable energy. The acceleration of a renewable-based transition relies on our collective ability to prioritize actions around key enablers, such as the modernization and the expansion of infrastructure, policy and market adaptation, and institutional and human capacity. All these areas are strongly linked to energy security, which is still predominantly viewed through the lens of the fossil fuel-dominated area in this geopolitical landscape. While there is not uniform way the country around the world pursue energy security, it is clear that traditional approaches are insufficient. Examples include discussion around critical material and hydrogen, which we already analyzed in depth under the umbrella of collaborative framework on geopolitics. Most of the time, discussion around energy security emerge in the global context at the time of crisis. This is understandable given the close link between fossil fuel and energy security, deeply intertwined with diplomacy and geopolitics. Given IRENA's work done on geopolitics to date, energy security was a natural next step to look into how all aspects of the evolving energy system now will fit together. We are looking to work to hearing your views, experience and reflection, also to inform the next phase of our work on energy security. It's also have to be understood that it is not a typical IRENA report. Here is a way of thinking report, I think, where we wish to outline the need for a new paradigm and really wait for your contribution to shape our future work. And we, with your permission, Mr. Vice President, I will ask Elizabeth Press, Director of Planning and Program Support, who is also leading IRENA's work on geopolitics, to present the key insight from the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director, for your work. Now I invite Ms. Elizabeth Press, Director of Planning and Programming Support of IRENA, to deliver a setting presentation. Mrs. Press, you have the word.
Thank you very much, and it's a real privilege to be able to share with you a few headlines from the report. As the Director General mentioned, it really is a think piece, trying to map out what are the elements that we need to think about as the transition takes hold, as we go towards the new system. And as Nora pointed out in the beginning, there was not much work around geopolitics and renewables. What we discovered while working on this report is very, very little about energy security and renewables as well. So there's really a lot of space to work on this, and this is our contribution to the beginning of this debate. Can I have a first slide? Thank you. Just very briefly, I don't want to go into technical details, but just to remind everybody, what we were working on is really what the energy mix will look like under the 1.5 degree scenario of IRENA's that we had in World Energy Transitions Outlook. And the key elements that matter here are really the high electrification, where we are going from fossil fuel dominated system into highly electrified system, which has consequences on how we actually conceptual energy security, and we estimate that the renewable energy share in the mix would go from 16% in 2020 to 77% by 2050. So that's a massive shift. And just to understand the premise from which we were actually analyzing this particular topic. Next slide, please. Thanks. And the part of it is really to understand where we're coming from, and that obviously there's no global definition of energy security. There's certain understandings. Different countries are looking at this from different angle, but it's very there's certain patterns. One, that the work is really industrialized country focused. It focuses on high energy users. So that lens is really narrow in many ways because it leaves much of the world out. The secondly, it's about commodities. It's about commodity trading. It's about how to secure fuels, not services. Then obviously centralized system, thermal plants, big systems that they're now starting to be decentralized with the introduction of renewables. A huge environmental footprint, as we know, that really is not even accounted for in the consideration of energy security. Energy poverty as well, not considered, and very much a short-term supply-oriented. Again, we're talking from a geopolitical perspective, so not a national perspective, because some of these things are handled internally in quite some detail as we were reviewing what different countries are doing. Next slide, please. The fact is that we are talking about energy transition, but there's hard facts on this. 86% of world's population lives in net importing countries of fossil fuels, and these are huge numbers, and also a good background to think about how do we, one, get the benefit out of the transition in the way that national budgets work and the way that impacts socioeconomic footprint, but at the same time to understand what do we need to do in a transitional period and how we can manage two systems in some ways while we are moving forward. Next slide, please. Another interesting thing, I just pulled out a few examples from the report to illustrate the magnitude of change that is undergoing. And, we know that shipping is a huge sector in the context of decarbonization, a large priority, but also understanding how the shipping sector itself would be changed if the fossil fuels are rapidly reduced, because currently about 40% of all products transported by shipping are fossil fuels and derivatives. So there is the consequences of the shift are way beyond just the energy mix. It actually is a lot larger across sectors. Next slide, please. Now, so what is it that matters in the electrified world that renewable energy brings that is more service-orientated, that is not a commodity-driven, that is very much decentralized, inclusive, bringing stakeholders in that are traditionally not players in the energy system. And when we were working on the energy security, geopolitics on hydrogen and critical materials, it was also very interesting because these topics were picked by countries because they were worried about what is happening then, what it does to look deeper at what is happening. But as we work on energy security, all of that comes together, and one of the key points that we want to make is that we should not be picking parts of the transitional issues. We should look at it holistically into what are the changes and how we can move these things in the way that we are not creating liabilities 5, 10 years down the road. So one of the key points is that fuels will take a back role and access to technology will be the front and center of everything. Because if you're harnessing domestic resource that everybody has to a certain extent, the question will be, do I have the technology? Where this technology comes from? What are the supply chains? What are the value chains? Who I need to work with to make sure that I'm safe in the long term? And this is where the point of no country alone can do this comes into play, and it's very important that we have a conversation early on about the diverse and robust supply chains for renewable energy technologies, energy transition technologies. The second part is the infrastructure. As we were talking about cross-border trade, it becomes a lot more important with the electrified system that who is around you and how you can actually gain flexibility and enlarge your market to also introduce not only technology but market solutions. So the infrastructure market starts becoming very, very important, and the angle of flexibility becomes paramount in the electrified system. The demand side of energy security traditionally was not really the centerpiece of everything. We have seen it in recent years in certain parts of the world emerging as one of the measures, but it's a very powerful tool to manage it through efficiency and other measures that come through that side. And, with integrated systems, obviously, that's going to be more and more important. Climate change, what was a little bit surprising when we were working on this was to see how few countries systematically look at climate risks and the long to medium term medium to long term on the impacts of climate change and the weather effects. It happens. Certain countries are doing it and certain companies are doing it, but it's not systemic. And so this is one of the points that we also want to highlight, because we often talk about mitigation, but the adaptation side of the energy system of the future is really paramount, and we need to pay a little bit more attention because this is going to be energy security of the future. And obviously some traditional parts like cybersecurity and infrastructure, physical infrastructure, that remains, it doesn't change. And finally, the human security, both in terms of how the resources come together, what are the competitions, what are the possibilities, what can we draw out of the transitional phase where people actually also participate in the transition, how do we capitalize on that part? Next slide, please. This is just to illustrate. We were trying to find a nice slide to show how many countries have renewable energy. So our team from Global Atlas, they actually put this techno-economic potential of four different renewable energies. And everybody has something. It might not lead to independence. It might not be the self-sufficiency. It might not be even desired, depending on the structure of the region or energy system. But everybody has something, and I think this is one of the really pointed points in this work that the level of control that one can have as we move forward. Next slide, please. I mentioned the infrastructure and the regional integration and cross-border trade that will become incredibly important in the context of electrification and flexibility that markets require. And we right now observe really a concentration of this. You can see in the red bits are the existing interconnectors, and the planned ones are the blue bits. And they kind of stay in the same areas. And I think this is one of the areas where really countries could look more closely and more proactively work on creating regional markets and cross-border connections that can actually facilitate the integration of high share of renewables. Technology solutions exist. There is no issue around that, but it really is the political trust, the cooperation that will move this agenda forward. Next slide, please. And we reflected a little bit on other parts beyond electricity, so hydrogen, critical materials. We did not go in depth because we have analyzed that previously. There was no reason for it, but I wanted to include this slide because I think it's very interesting to see how the hydrogen infrastructure is evolving in terms of where the new pipelines or existing or planned, and where the hydrogen storage is being planned, and the concentration of players that they see themselves part of the global trade in hydrogen. And we will continue to monitor how this evolves because it has an impact and implication across the board, both in the regions where these developments are occurring, but also for global trade and codependencies and interdependencies in the long term. Next slide, please. We offered a set of recommendations. We were focusing mostly around the transitional phase. What should be done in the short to medium term? What should we pay attention at as we move forward? And sort of keeping in mind these areas that we need to pay attention at. How can we use energy security as a framework as well for the investment to go into the right areas, so that we prevent errors, so that we're not making large investment decisions in the way that is not sustainable in the long term. So we have made this set of the recommendations, thinking about that we're going to end up in the electrified, renewables-dominated world. And amongst other things, the conversations that we can have in this setting will be absolutely critical. So I will stop here because we really want to hear from you and have a little bit of a conversation about the context. And we will have the report online, I think in a minute. I think maybe it's already online, but we printed a set of slides as well that are on your desks if you want to take a closer look at that. So thank you very much for your attention, and I hand it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Press, for this insightful presentation. I think it was very good and very important. During the next segment of this Ministerial Roundtable on the geopolitics of the energy security, we will be hear insight from the high-level panel of speakers on the subject matter. The discussion will be moderated by Mr. John DeFabio, visiting professor of business of University of New York. University of New York, Abu Dhabi, followed by the reflection on coming closing remark. Let me now hand over the moderator over you, Mr. DeFabio.
Mr. Gomez, we've become very good friends over the last couple of days here, so we're doing so many sessions together. Special envoy, thanks for the invitation, and congratulations, Elizabeth and team, on the report. I had an early copy to prepare for this roundtable. I think it's excellent that we have so many participants. You can see by the audience in the room how everybody sees the geopolitics of energy. I think it's a highlight for IRENA in 2024, of course. And through COVID-19, a series of conflicts and bottlenecks at the major arteries of the world for trade, due in part because of conflicts, we've had to learn about the geopolitics of energy in hyperspeed, if you will. The UAE consensus, and obviously the COP Troika, gives a phenomenal opportunity for a pivot point to accelerate the transition, I think. I think we've learned through experience that when there's a crisis, global countries can rally. I think that's the case during COVID-19. This certainly was the case when I covered the global financial crisis for CNN in 2008 to 2011. And I think it's obviously been the case over the last 3 years when conflicts shut out a lot of supplies and governments had to be nimble and they had to think beyond their borders at the same time. It will take a global moonshot, of course, to try to stay on track for 1.5 degrees centigrade. Everybody's seen the reports. 3 times renewables capacity by 2030, 2 times reduction in energy, reductions in emissions and boosting efficiency. And we don't talk about it in this room because it's renewable space, but there's a pledge at COP28 as well to try to triple the deployment of nuclear energy in more than 20 countries. I want this to be as open as possible. They've given me a license to do so. You could all make a statement for the 3 minutes, but we're extremely tight on time because we're trying to wrap up in 40 minutes. We have 7 ministers and international organizations and 1 from the private sector. Mr. Rahman, thanks for responding to the call to get the private sector around the table. So let's be realistic on the statements, keep it short. For the other 11 that are not in the core 7, I would suggest not going to the statement and make comments related to both the report and the most urgent matter in your country today. I also would like to follow up on some of your statements, if you go in that direction, to drill down a little bit to the link of the geopolitics of energy. I'm not being aggressive, I'm just looking for a little more dialogue without the written statements in front of us. The Commissioner of Energy is here from the European Commission. It's great to see her, Kadri Simpson. We've done a number of events in the last 2 years together. I know the great priority she puts on the geopolitics of energy, which is at the forefront of the European response. I'll take the floor to you. I'll leave the desk and we'll go from there. Thanks very much.
Thank you, John. And indeed, for us, our global partnerships have been essential since Russia started its manipulation. So you all witnessed the difficulties in the previous couple of years due to the very high energy prices. But Europe was in the front line in that regard. And our reading from the previous 2 years was that our consumers, our households, had to pay extremely high prices, not because of our climate ambition, not because we were promoting renewables, but on the contrary, because we were not green enough, because we were too dependent on fossil fuel imports. And to respond to this challenge, of course, we had to prioritize green transition, we had to prioritize energy efficiency, and past year and the year before that, Europe significantly reduced its CO2 emissions. So we were in this position where there was a decision to be made. Will we switch back from gas that we lost to Russian unilateral action to coal, or will we promote renewables? We did the latter. That allowed us to replace significant share of natural gas with renewables and allowed us to stabilize markets first in Europe, but this played an important role also globally. As you saw from Elizabeth's slides, Europe has the most advanced interconnected electricity grid, and that was also the key, that we were able to electrify and replace natural gas in many sectors with electricity. And it is not only EU 27 member states who are interconnected, and we truly believe that interconnection is a key, because fragmented markets will make energy transition too expensive. But since 2022, we also interconnected Ukraine's electricity grid and Moldova electricity grid with ours. So despite the Russian attempts to destroy civil infrastructure in Ukraine, we have been able to keep the lights on, and we have been able to provide civilians in Ukraine, despite these atrocities that Russia is committing, access to electricity. And I think that this is also a lesson to be learned, that if military attacks will target thermal power plants, but also hydro dams, then renewables, wind and solar, can provide regional alternatives to this destruction. And from our side, we are supporting our neighbors, also with homegrown renewables. And this is only possible because we have built out an advanced electricity infrastructure, and that really plays a role in this very volatile world.
Great. Thank you for collaborating here on this, on scrapping the statement. Just a quick follow-up, if I may, in a 1-minute answer. What did we learn from the energy crisis over the last 3 years of Europe? Was there an over-dependency, and we have to map better, not only for natural gas and not be over-dependent on one country or the other, but to make sure that the energy system's robust to take in this investment into renewables? What was the key lesson you learned from that, Commissioner?
I think that for Europeans, the biggest success was that due to this manipulation, our local communities and individuals felt that they can take the responsibility. They can install rooftop solar panels. They can support the permitting process in their near neighborhood to build new wind farms. And they can, by doing so, take care of our security of supply. So last year, we brought online 70 gigawatts of new renewables within 1 year. And across Europe, 3 million heat pumps were installed. So that was an action from grassroots, and that allows our governments to fast-track renewables even further. And in this regard, I think that it is very important that all major global players We'll also invest some of the public funds, like Europeans did with our Next Generation EU funds, for research and innovation, because by doing so, by bringing down the cost for new technology, we will make it affordable across the globe.
Great, thanks very much for that. In Ms. Press' report you singled out, I'm glad you grabbed that slide, 112 to 116 countries are net importers, whether it's oil, natural gas, or coal, so there's great dependency. I've covered energy for 30 years for CNN and know it well. The reality is demand for oil is over 100 million barrels a day, and we see natural gas demand, if you look at the forecast, rising 50% to 2040 alone. So there's a major transition underway. I've had a great opportunity to go to Korea on a number of occasions. I've seen the industrial growth over the last 50 years. Both South Korea and the UAE hold the mantle for having the fastest industrial development of any country from zero to where you are today. Mr. Young Kyung-rok, and it's interesting, you have trade, industry, and energy under the one umbrella because they're so intertwined. You are a major importer. How do you handle the geopolitics of energy with the uncertainty around Taiwan, but also your transition to renewable energy? Please turn on your mic. Thanks very much.
To your disappointment, I'd like to talk something different. I was thinking about, by listening to the presentation, I was thinking about that cooperation between international organizations is really important. That's what I was thinking. And I mean, for example, World Bank and IMF can also tackle this issue by analyzing what is the impact on macroeconomic indicators over energy security issue as well. And World Trade Organization can discuss what is the relation between trade and energy security issue. And maybe international energy agencies, including IRENA and IEA, can do their own parts. And for example, I mean, regional international banks will do their own parts. And maybe very political international organizations like United Nations can also discuss about this one. So maybe we can come up with a big event so that many different international organizations can take part their own jobs. That's what I was thinking. And maybe I'm gonna think about how I can answer your question. I'm little left this one.
No problem. Are you suggesting, though, that the international lending institutions focus more attention on investments in renewables and in terms of serving as a guarantor to some of the investments into the renewable space, and particularly in what is defined the developing world today? Okay, very good. If I may, I was going to call on the Minister of Cyprus. Don't mean to surprise everybody, but you're part of the core group we wanted to introduce. You're an island state. You're sitting on a lot of natural gas resources. You've made it a priority to transition into renewable energy. You've got a lot of potential on both solar and wind, of course. Could be a hydrogen center. Mr. Papanastasiou, do you want to address core issues of the report that just has come out? Elizabeth laid out a number of topics in her initial statements here for us to think of. The geopolitics have stood in the way of development of the Eastern Med in many respects as well. The floor is yours. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, John. Cyprus is sitting in a geography where turmoil is quite common, especially these days where we have this aggression between Israel and Hamas. Recently, we have seen the Iran attacking Israel. So you understand Cyprus is a place where we see quite often some activity which impacts immediately energy. And Cyprus is a net importer of fossil fuels, and sitting in a place where indeed there is wealth out there in the exclusive economic zone of Cyprus natural gas, the decision has been made consciously to move very fast to green transition, simply because, for one simple reason, that we are in more control of our destiny by having renewables in the country. And definitely what we see is that natural gas, even if it's nearby and the discoveries which they are in our exclusive economic zone, they are not totally in our control. It's a country which is small. It doesn't have any military presence. You understand there is quite some interest of natural gas in the Eastern Mediterranean. So the decision has been made that renewables is the way forward. And indeed, we managed very well over the last few years. We see quite some increase of the use of renewables, as currently we have renewables which are in excess of half the requirements of the country in terms of megawatts. However, because the grids, they are not there, and the smart grids, I mean, we cannot handle the full, we cannot get the full, let's say, use of the generation from renewables. And indeed, during spring and autumn, we have certain curtailments. And as currently, I mean, in April, we expect it to be 70% curtailment. So you understand it's a lot of lost green energy, which we are taking very seriously because we rely totally on fossil fuels. And this is what our next target is to remove as much as possible of the fossil fuels in the power generation and move rapidly from conventional power generation to renewables. However, you understand that we need, despite the technologies having been developed, you understand that in a small island which doesn't connect with anything, and the last effort we are making, and the most recent effort that we are making, is to connect the country via interconnector. And this interconnector, which the new name is Great Sea Interconnector, connects Israel, Cyprus, and Crete, which means that Cyprus will be connected with Europe. And if we manage to get this niche market of electricity connected to a major electricity market of the EU, you understand that it's like having a unified electricity market, which Cyprus can enjoy the prices that electricity is being sold at the retail price, I mean, of electricity. As currently, Cyprus has one of the most expensive electricities in Europe, most probably in the world. And I will give a few figures just for the people to understand.
I just need you to conclude in a minute, though.
Yes,
Thank
just to say that we have the retail price of 33 euro cents per kilowatt hour versus the neighboring country of Greece, which is close to 16 euro cents per kilowatt hour. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much for the review and the holes in the system, if you will. I never realized that Cyprus has the highest energy costs. I know as an island state, it's a challenge. Ms. Anna Schipsberg is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Energy Transformation within the Bureau of Energy Resources of the Department of State. My daughter interned at the Department of Energy last year, and she said, that woman's got a lot of girl power. I don't mean that cutely, but she did look up to you, and you're a torchbearer for her future, if you will. I know how active the Department of State has been on the energy transition, and during the crisis we've seen over the last 3 years that I talked about. How would you like to address the geopolitics of energy today? As I said, when there's a crisis on the table, the world can rally. Do you want to pick it up from there, please?
Absolutely. I mean, there's many ways to address energy security.
I know, there's a lot of options
there's a lot of options. Traditionally, we always looked at it as the movement of fuel, availability of fuel, its impact on balance of payments, and then the ability for it to be used for coercive reasons. And we are more than happy, of course, to come and help partners around the world during crises. What we also see, though, is the ability to now mitigate some of those risks with renewables. Elizabeth made a comment before that some countries look at climate change as part of their national security agenda. The United States is one of those countries. We take it seriously because it can cause humanitarian crises, displacement. And so renewables can be a contributor to that because energy is, of course, 75% of greenhouse gas emissions. With that said, we do not want to end up in the same place that we've seen our energy resources lead us to, which is dependent and often in a play of manipulation. And so when we look at the inputs that go into renewables, even though they're temporally different, fuel needs to move on a constant basis to provide us with output versus the raw materials that go into renewables. Once they go into an asset, that asset lasts 30 years. Temporally, it's different. Nonetheless, the amount of critical minerals we need to ramp up the clean energy transition and all the clean tech is so significant that if we don't fundamentally change the way we look at these things and the way we invest in these projects and how we diversify, we will have similar risk points, and we can't afford those risk points, which is why the United States has spent a significant amount of time with its partners, including with Europe, with Korea, developing a mineral security partnership that is focused on investing in critical minerals for the energy transition, because we want to make sure that we are mitigating energy risks, not creating new ones.
Okay, can I do a quick follow-up with you?
Sure.
To keep your mic on? I just chaired a private roundtable in London, which brought together bankers and international organizations and African companies looking to get investment. You know this effort by Saudi Arabia to create the super region from Central Asia to here in the Gulf down to Central Africa for critical minerals. And the G in governance holds back investment in Africa. It's come out in the reports. I saw it in the introductory remarks that they're getting less than 10% of the overall money deployed to developing markets. It's just a small fraction of what's out there. How do we, if we're looking to triple renewable capacity by 2030, you do need to unlock this idea of money going into Africa and the rest of the developing world that sits on resources, of course. But there's a lot of talk, but not a lot of money getting funneled. How do you see that happening? Because if you need the minerals quickly, you need to get through the governance question marks that are there.
Absolutely, and it's a very opaque and volatile market. With that said, we can't have ESG issues in critical minerals that go into renewables that are supposed to save the planet, because then we're not really saving the planet, are we? It's the reason we are working with African countries on projects, on their regulatory frameworks, on ESG. We've identified a number of projects in Africa that the mineral security partners are actually reviewing, and some of them have actually received commitments of possible financing through our agency and DFIs. So we see that opportunity. What we understand is that we need to go in, we need to support these countries on the regulatory front, we need to help them identify investment, and we have to make sure we're partners along the way, and we help identify offtake. Without that, there's no way we will build that scale.
Okay, very good. Thanks for taking the follow-up. I'd like to call on Ms. Lisa Cummins as Minister of Energy and Business from Barbados, another government that's decided to link energy as a strategic nature to business and pulling in FDIs. I wanted to commend IRENA again. The development of the SIDS on the agenda has completely transformed the whole dialogue within the COP process. So congratulations. You've heard a lot. I'm sure you have a different perspective what the energy transition looks like, but also bringing FDI into Barbados. I know the work that you're doing. Before you take the microphone, I've got the IEA and Mr. Lamont from EDF to weigh in. The rest of you can just turn your placard and I'll call on you. I think that's the best way to do it most efficiently because we have 20 minutes less. Please, go ahead. Thanks.
Thank you very much, and it really has been interesting listening to the colleagues, and the geopolitics of this is perhaps real for all of us in very different ways. I want to start by perhaps giving you a context for numbers, and my colleague earlier when they spoke from Korea, you raised the question about fossil fuel importation, and I want to start with numbers there deliberately to be able to put into context what a transition for an island like Barbados is, and going back to the presentation coming from IRENA on the net import bill for countries. In 2018, Barbados imported $582.2 million in fossil fuel. 2019, $579 million. 2020, $431.1 million. In October of last year, we hit an all-time high, and we had imported $982 million worth of fossil fuels. That's not an insignificant sum. In particular, when we then balance that against what the investment in renewables and the transition looks like, we have started to estimate what it would cost a country like Barbados that doesn't just import the fuels, the fossils that we're transitioning away from. We're importing 100% of the infrastructure for solar PV. We're importing 100% of the storage that is going to be required to support the intermittent nature of renewables. we're importing in some instances a lot of the skills and the capacity to be able to facilitate our transition. And so it means that the geopolitics of this for a small island like Barbados is linked not simply and narrowly to the importation of fossil fuels and replacing that with renewables, but we're replacing it almost with an import substitution model of a different kind in this instance, which is highly dependent on developed economies. And it is the reason why Barbados has, in fact, absolutely linked this conversation to our development, to access to finance, the relationship with financial institutions, international financial institutions, and of course the relationship between blended finance, which we have now begun to evolve to move beyond access to equity financing from investment, debt financing from international financial institutions, but also grant capital to be able to reduce the cost of electricity given the net import basis on which our economies are based and the vulnerabilities of countries like ours, which are highly dependent on technologies and the evolution of other countries to be able to fund and finance and advance our own energy transition.
Okay, good. Just really quickly in the follow-up, with the spirit of the COP28 and the UAE consensus, they laid out a loss and damage fund and the architecture and the contributions of nearly $800 million. This ability to try to set up a structure that unlocks funding for the developing countries, such as yourself. Do you think it's the real deal, and are we starting to see movements that support it?
Well, we've waited for a long time for there to even be consensus around the establishment of a loss and damage fund. And so that alone in COP28 was a significant movement for us, and we were very supportive of that. Barbados then, led by our Prime Minister, Mia Motley, would have spent a lot of time working along with other countries to be able to bring them to the table. Now, in terms of the implementation, that's where the real work begins. And as we've seen in the UAE consensus, that's really the fine work that is underway as we speak. And so we talked about the weather here yesterday, for example, and it was funny. I was sitting last night in the Women in Diplomacy event with two of my colleagues from Dominica and St. Vincent and Grenada, countries that have had climate events. And so we were all having this conversation around how different countries at different levels of development navigate climate crises and what the implications of an event like yesterday would have been for small countries like ours. That's where the loss and damage fund comes in, and that's where our advocacy must be centered.
Good. I was going to say, I've been moderating panels for 25 years. First time I had to call one short because of a flood. Internal flooding, actually. Never thought we could have that, right? That was a surprise, and it happened quickly. When the audience started to leave, I knew we had to kind of change tact. That was the order of the day. The Deputy Director of the IEA is here with us, Mary Bruce Warlick. I've had a chance to work with the Executive Director on a number of different occasions. You've been on the forefront of trying to pull together that research on the energy transition. How does it dovetail with geopolitics? I wanted to leave you some gaps to do as others have done to figure out the pathway we should be addressing here. Then we'll go to Switzerland and Spain next. Please, thanks.
Great. Well, I just want to say thank you so much to IRENA for the opportunity to contribute to this discussion, and also taking the initiative to have a discussion specifically on this topic. As you know, energy security has really been very much the founding mission of the IEA from the very beginning. It's the heart and soul, really, of what we do in terms of looking at our energy systems, both traditional and new. And obviously, with the energy transition, we have new security issues to take a close look at. And, as Commissioner Simpson has said, I think there's the last 2 years have really made it quite clear how important it is for us to be continuing to look closely at these issues, both in terms of diversification, of course, which I think Europe has done such a good job of, but also of really doubling down on accelerating the energy transition and our continued investment in renewables. Our ministers at our ministerial in February made a number of points on this topic, and among other things, made the points that energy and climate security are inextricably linked, and clean energy transitions ensure energy security. And so that's what I think we all really very much need to focus on. I think it's quite clear, of course, many of the advantages that renewables and investment in renewables is bringing to our people and our planet, of course, in terms of the reduction of emissions and meeting our climate goals. But as Elizabeth showed in that fine map that she showed, a little bit earlier, renewable resources are really spread out all around the world. And so in a lot of senses, those resources are providing a really good geographically broad opportunity for countries to invest. And the more and more that is invested in solar PV and onshore wind, for example, new jobs are being created. These are the cheapest forms of electricity generation in most countries, and thereby contributing to affordability. In fact, just to use one data point, according to our analysis, EU electricity consumers have saved an estimated 100 billion during the 2021 to 2023 period, thanks to newly installed solar PV and wind. So lots of advantages there. But the challenges are certainly ones we need to focus on as well, even as we really step up increased investment in renewable power capacity and growth, the whole subject of grids and interconnections, the resilience of our power systems is coming to the fore. That's a subject we've been looking at really closely at the IEA, and I know is a lot of interest to countries all around the world. And of course, we really need to be focusing too on the resilience and diversity of clean energy technology supply chains, something we've been looking at closely, not only with regard to critical minerals, as has been touched upon, which is obviously truly important, but also the concentration of the production of many of these technologies. So this is causing lots of countries to think about their industrial strategies and so forth. And so I just, finish up by saying that I think as we're, one last point, because you touched on financing. This is a critically important one, as has been mentioned, because, and again, an area we've been focusing on really quite a lot. That is the question of the cost of capital and the access to financing in emerging and developing economies in particular. And those are the parts of the world that we need to, and the specific financing issues that I think we need to look at even more closely. And then working together, I think, is going to be so important as we look to try to really look ahead to what the new challenges may be and will be as our energy systems continue to evolve. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary. I like the idea of South Korea. You don't want just another event for the sake of an event, but one that is actually highly focused on unlocking financing for the energy transition in the developing world. I know the global south is not the most popular term these days. You don't want north versus south, but one that's actually directed in that area. And I think the UAE is hosting the Global Stock Take to take a read going into Azerbaijan of where we are on that. So a good pivot point for it. Mr. Rahman, thanks for your patience. And as an organization, we thank you for jumping in because we wanted to get the voice of the private sector. He's the CEO of EDF, and then I'll pick up all the other countries that have their placards up, including Germany in the back row there, Marcus. Please, just turn on your microphone. Just be cognizant of time for sure. Thanks.
Well, first, thanks very much for the invitation. Feels like a privilege and a responsibility to speak as a company in such a gathering of policymakers of very important countries. So I'll try to be short and share with you what security of supply means for a company that supplies electricity. It basically means that we want to be able to deliver electricity to our customers, millions of customers, 24/7 and low carbon. That's really how we define security of supply. Today, we are delivering millions of customers. We are low carbon at 91% of what we deliver. And of course, this takes a diversity of solutions since many years that we have built in several countries. Thank you very much for the report. The report was really spot on, I believe, showing really that we are at a pivoting moment between previous dependencies and with potentially the benefit and the risk in shifting into new type of dependencies and basically moving from reserves and the security of supply of fuel sources to technology supply and the necessity to be flexible because we are basically delivering electricity which is difficult to store. So we are creating new dependencies between each other more locally on the ones who want electricity at one moment and the others who don't want electricity at that moment. Geopolitics, I'm not an expert of that, I'm sorry, I'm just a company leader. But the impression I have is that geopolitics may start from one village to the next. When you have in one place, you have one windmill and the other one, you have a solar panel, geopolitics can start there. And we have, as a company, we have to manage these dimensions from the local level to, of course, the multi-continent level. Few tips on how we address these topics. First, a company normally considers that trade, fair trade, is the best way to ensure that things go smoothly over time. So we try to apply this and to make sure that we can source and dispatch our technology and our power in the most smooth way. Nevertheless, of course, things occur that can impact regions and the world potentially. And to prepare ourselves for these type of events, we try to work first on our supply chains to make sure that we, wherever we can, we go for shorter supply chains. We avoid to have too long supply chains or too dispatched supply chains. And when we can source local, we source local. That's the best way to prevent from disruptions. And in this respect, we are trying to build more and more regional supply chains, notably in Europe, for all the technology. Second, we try not to depend on one source or one technology. A diversity of solutions will be needed to be successful in the transition, also because we need to deliver permanently. So we need renewables, we need also dispatchable capacities to make sure that we ensure a balance, and that's where we continue to work to develop as aggressively as we can all of these technologies to shift to more power, which at the end of the day is the best way to be successful in our common journey of decarbonation. Thank you very much.
Thanks. I love how a CEO of a major energy company says you don't like to get stuck in geopolitics, but Christophe de Margerie told me the same thing, and so does Patrick Pouyanné of Total. Peace be upon Christophe de Margerie. But the politics do get in the way of some decisions. I mean, we even have a stretch target of tripling nuclear capacity. Is that a good idea by 2050 to complement what's being done on transition? Can you do that in 30 seconds, and then we'll move on?
Well, basically, I think any region has to decide which mix of technology they want for achieving transition. Overall, to deliver 24/7 in power, which is basically what customers expect, you need a mix of solutions, which is providing low carbon generation as much as you can from wind and solar, plus hydro, by the way, which is sometimes forgotten in the renewables as well. But you need as well some dispatchable capacity to offset the intermittency that Cyprus has been very well describing just earlier on. And this mix, in this mix, with today's technology, nuclear is part of the solution. So tripling nuclear by 2050 is a big challenge, of course, from an industry standpoint. But yes, it's part of the solution, and that's where we are working.
Great, thank you. I'm not going to be rude to my friend from Switzerland, but I have a lot of names in front of me. Yours is not one of them, so I wouldn't make it the anonymous transfer to Switzerland, but you take the whole country on your shoulders. You can introduce yourself on this one.
Thank you. Benoit Reva, State Secretary from Switzerland. While talking about energy transition, we spend a lot of time talking about additional renewable sources. But let's not forget the infrastructure. And Elizabeth mentioned in her presentation the traditional approach favoring large-scale centralized systems. But what we will face now is the challenge of combining large-scale centralized systems with distributed generation and flexibility, use of flexibility. And this will need additional investment, large investment, resources also, and also the challenge of making all the system much more smarter in order to tackle the challenges also for cybersecurity. So the challenges are broader than the addition of renewable sources in our system.
Thank you very much for that. I'd like to call on the Deputy Minister of Energy, His Excellency Mr. Pavel Smitans. I've had a chance to interview Mr. Novak many times during the crisis, during the OPEC, non-OPEC plus meetings when COVID-19 kicked in. I was chasing him down the street and he did talk to us, so which was a good thing. What would you like to add? Just be aware of time. I assume you're going to go into English. Is that okay?
Я буду докладывать по-русски, а мой коллега из посольства, нашего посольства...
To translate. Okay, just be hard and fast on 3 minutes, otherwise I'll need to intervene. Thank you very much.
Спасибо.
Да, 3 минуты просто, коротко.
Окей. Ну, я не хотел бы политизировать свое выступление. Спасибо большое. И постараюсь поделиться опытом в проектирования развития энергосистемы и электросистемы Российской Федерации.
First of all, I would not like to politicize my speech, and let me focus mostly on the experience and development of the energy networks of Russia.
Учитывая постоянно растущие потребности в энергетических мощностях, развитие сектора ВИА дает, в свою очередь, в повышении энергобезопасности свою часть из-за более коротких сроков строительства и за счет постоянного снижения стоимости производства электрической энергии на объектах возобновляемой энергетики.
Taking into account the permanently growing requirements and demands in the energy capacity, the development of renewable sector makes its contributions toward the building up of energy security thanks to the shorter term periods of construction and permanent increase in the cost of production of the electric power on the capacities of the renewable energy.
Понимаю, что технологии солнечно-ветровой генерации более зависимы от переменных метеорологических параметров, чем традиционная генерация. Мы уделяем достаточное внимание построению эффективной системы прогнозирования выработки электроэнергии таких объектов и их размещению в энергосистеме с учетом технологических возможностей, топологии сети и имеющихся резервирующих мощностей.
As far as solar generation and wind generation are more dependable on the changing meteorological parameters than traditional generation of energy, we pay more attention to more precise building of the generation system and networks, trying to predict the production of electric energy of such an objects, and to position the energy networks, taking into consideration all the technological specialities and networks in general, and also taking into account the capabilities of power reserves.
Okay, excuse me for a second. Because of time, and I don't mean to be rude whatsoever, just one more minute.
Okay.
So do you want to give concluding remarks for the translator, please, or interpreter?
Okay.
Thanks very much.
Одна минута.
В настоящее время в России в части участия технического регулятора, системного оператора, будет применяться комплексный подход и оценка в целях территориального долгосрочного планирования при размещении объектов ВИА.
And currently, with the participation of related regulating authority in Russia, we will follow the complex approach in assessment and planning the position of energy production capacities for renewables.
Мы будем уделять достаточное внимание сетевому строительству, в том числе на основе технологий постоянного тока и строительству гидроаккумулирующих станций.
Most of all, we will focus on the building of new networks based on the technology of constant current and technologies of hydropower.
В этой связи важное значение имеет просветительская работа IRENA по подготовке информационно-аналитических материалов. И, мне кажется, это оказывает большую помощь. Мы готовы участвовать в этом диалоге, предоставлять материалы. Спасибо за внимание.
And in this case, we also like to make a stress on the awareness-raising activities by IRENA, which is very helpful for the assisting in the trends of energy transition and promotion of renewables. We are ready to join this work as well, and thank you for the attention.
Надеюсь, я справился.
I hope that I managed just to be on time.
Even with the interpreter, you did well. Yeah, thank you very much.
Даже с переводчиком всего
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks. I'm going to call on His Excellency José Manuel Albanes Bueno, the Minister of Foreign Affairs from Spain. You've been very patient. I saw you put your placard down. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. I feel very humble among so many ministers. I'm simply the ambassador of Spain to the UAE.
Oh, okay, good.
You. I will tell my minister that
don't
I was
go back.
promoted.
I hope I'm not getting you fired.
From the start, I wanted to...
You can blame it on IRENA and John Defterios on this one.
Thank you. I wanted to start by recording that over the years, Spain has greatly profited from the EU common policies and actions on the energy transition and the fight against climate change in a Team Europe approach. And I think it is very important if I can make 3 or 4 comments on factors for international energy security from our perspective. First is a decisive and systematic commitment to the implementation of renewable technologies in the energy matrix. This is what Spain has been doing for years, and last year renewable energies exceeded 50% of electricity generation for the first time. So first, it is essential to have local energy sources. And within the range of these sources, I think renewable energies are the ones that offer greatest security and sustainability. And their deployment not only benefits climate change and air quality, but also holds the promise of a more secure and sustainable future for all. Second comment, we believe that the location of distributed renewable energy, such as energy communities, serves to increase security of supply and to empower the population by involving them in the energy transition. Third, I believe that the shift from a system of large fossil generation nodes to a system with sizable renewable generation nodes, but with many, many distributed renewable nodes, storage and demand-side management via flexibility, makes energy systems much more resilient and much better able to withstand external stresses for whatever reason, be it climate change or security of supply. And finally, because it's been raised, I'd like to make a comment on trade. In this globalized world, Europe and of course Spain are very dependent on international trade. And I think we must consider the future of these exchanges in the field of energy transition as we move forward as an opportunity for the future. And we believe that there are opportunities for all actors, those who currently play a vital role in the energy industry, but also those who have traditionally had to import practically 100% of our energy consumption, and who, as is the case of Spain, have been building a green economy sector with optimal results in terms of technology and efficiency. And I say this because I think we can all contribute through the transfer of technologies and knowledge to improving the collective green security to which we aspire. I try to be brief.
That was very direct. Thank you. You can take that for your promotion up to the next level. I'm glad you brought up trade, because they had the WTO Ministerial after COP28 here with Dr. Thani Zoyudi in the UAE to try to make the link to the energy transition, making sure that the trade supply chains don't get bottlenecked like we had during COVID-19. Are we going to go till 4:15? We're good. Got the green light to do that. Wanted to call on His Excellency from Italy, Francesco Covaro. If you're standing in for somebody else and I don't know, I'm not taking a hit this time. So
don't worry.
Please go, and then we'll go to Germany after, and then to Estonia. Thank you.
And thanks, John, because you are a university professor. I am a university professor too. So normally I am in the middle of politicians and diplomats. So it's not
I always underscore I'm a visiting professor, but I practiced for 35 years, so they gave me a license to do it. Thanks.
So I would like to start with the sentence of Churchill that, as you know, said, never let a crisis go to waste. He added good. This is not a good crisis. We are in a big energy crisis after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But thanks to this situation, we understood that our countries are not independent and resilient from this point of view. Under this aspect, the role of renewable energy, energy efficiency, innovation, clean technologies increase a lot their roles. And this is extremely important. In Italy, we are working a lot at the national level and moreover in the G7 presidencies to increase the renewable energy installations. For which reason? Because on one hand, it reduces dependency on international energy markets and mitigates the risk associated with geopolitical tension. On the other side, we need new infrastructures, and this infrastructure can be an opportunity for new jobs, for younger generation, but not only for younger generation, for our citizens. Thanks to this transformation presents an opportunity for nations to strengthen their energy independence and resilience. And from this side, Italy wants to remember the role that we have inside the European community The Team Europe is thinking to do this together, not alone. And another important aspect connected with the role of renewable energies is the possibility to discover, to give a new awareness to our citizens, to give them the possibility to become producer and not only consumer. This is a new thing, a new mind that is necessary to develop as soon as possible. And finally, in conclusion, as you know, the transition to renewable energy represents a pivotal shift in the concept of energy security. From this side, Italy is strongly committed, and we want to put this under the attention of also COP29. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cavaro. Marcus, thanks for being patient, and I got to give the Patience Award to the man who's sitting next to me at the head table. I didn't realize our Belgian representative was right behind me the whole time. He's probably wondering I have his back to him. Please. And then we'll go to Belgium and Estonia. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, John. And first of all, thank you to IRENA for the new report. Hans Olaf has alluded in the beginning already to the fact that Germany, together with some other countries like Norway, like our host country UAE, we have supported this work stream in the past and will continue to support it. Instead of making a long statement, let me just say I would like to thank her and fully align with the statement made in the beginning by the EU Commissioner Simpson. She caught the relevant points. I think the last 2 years have taught us that energy transition is not just, in quotation marks, a climate policy imperative, but also a security policy imperative. But then again, in the new report, you also mentioned that basically renewables are superior to fossils in terms of that they are less likely to become weaponized. And this is surely true, and you showed some good slides for that. But we have to manage, and this is what's in front of all of us, we have to manage this upcoming intermediate period while we go there, and this might be an interesting and sometimes messy ride. So I would just like to close by saying also in our recent national security strategy from Germany, we learned the hard way. We learned it the hard way, and we said, okay, we need diversification and resilience by means of renewables, and also in the transition period. Thanks, John.
Very, very good. I guess when we talked about, Mr. Cavaro talked about the never waste a good crisis, so to speak. This was the lesson in Germany, right? Because the LNG clearance to respond to that initial challenge and then the deployment into renewables was very, very swift moving. Mr. Philippe Henry, thank you. You're representing Walloon, but you're also in the Ministry of Energy and Infrastructure. I wanted to make sure, Netherlands, I was going to call on you. Are you back in, or do you want to go off? Oh, we'll make time. No worries. We got you. Thanks. Please, Phil.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon. Small countries are sometimes hidden, but well present. Thank you very much. I would first bring fully support to and underline the need to bring this topic on the table, but it's a complex topic, as we heard in several interventions, that encompasses many subjects that deserve in-depth discussions. In the short time we have, I will only take the opportunity to identify a couple of points. First, a future energy mix dominated by the renewables and low-carbon energy, such as solar, wind, hydrogen, modern biomass, is more likely to have a national and regional footprint, implying that a convergence between energy security and sustainability could be possible. Countries shifting towards more decarbonized domestic energy sources are likely to be more self-reliant and less dependent on the global trade of energy, especially if coupled with efficiency and sufficiency measures that reduce the overall energy needs and its critical raw materials needs. Of course, we should be wary of creating new dependencies, particularly on a limited number of suppliers or critical raw materials. And in addition, renewable energy, while low in operational costs, requires high upfront investment costs, both for the renewable energy installations and for the energy system as a whole. That's why the investment, as it was said, in grids are paramount. And furthermore, the intermittency of renewables poses a significant challenge for security of supply. Solutions to match demand and supply are needed, both in the short and the long term. Nevertheless, coupled with energy storage technologies, a renewable-based energy system, utility scale or distributed, can further support energy security. That's why I find this subject very interesting, and I suppose we'll still have further discussions later on that subject. Thank you very much.
Thanks again for your patience. Again, another government that's bundled in the energy security, climate, infrastructure with economy, right? Because they're so tightly interlinked. We have time for two more. Thanks for your patience here. Katrin Sarsulu Layachi, I hope I said that remotely close, not bad, okay? It's yours, and then we'll finish up with Netherlands. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Thank you for giving me the floor. It's certainly true that the clean energy transition will not remove politics from the energy sector. The landscape of energy geopolitics will just change. We are seeing first signs of that already now, where countries that have relied on exporting fossil fuels and thus enjoyed significant degree of power are looking into new fields of economic activity in the production of clean energy or elsewhere. Therefore, energy resources will continue to be used as a tool of influence. Estonia has already felt these new dynamics. For several years, we enjoyed almost full energy independence thanks to our local fossil fuel oil shale. This provided the bulk of our energy production and was concentrated in only one region in Estonia and the northeast. For the obvious reasons, we are moving now away from oil shale, and in recent years, we have been much more dependent on electricity imports from neighboring countries. This brought us low electricity prices for several years, but also raised the question of security of supply, as we witnessed during the energy crisis, which started in autumn 21. It has now become clear that the balanced energy policy will require a massive increase in the domestic production of renewable energy, investments into dispatchable power plants, as well as even more interconnections. Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine intensified the need for change. Until the winter of 22, Estonia received up to 85% of our natural gas from Russia. Soon after the war in Ukraine escalated, we ended all gas imports from Russia and started cooperating with Finland to bring a floating LNG terminal into our region. Today, Estonia imports gas in the form of LNG from Norway and the United States, which Russian imports banned by law. Similar changes have taken place throughout the European Union. Estonia is proud that the EU has divorced itself from Russian energy imports and set clear targets to phase out remaining imports as soon as possible. This is why we in Estonia like to think of energy security in broader terms. Yes, the essence of energy security is the availability of energy resources, but nowadays we also have to consider the affordability of energy, the sustainability of energy production, and in the case of energy imports, the political aspects as well. Energy is becoming more and more one of those areas where states seek to use energy supplies to manage tensions in their relations. This can make the threat of cutting off energy supplies, as Europe has experienced in the past and the present, or by imposing sanctions as means to respond to aggression. This needs to be tackled step by step. The way out of fossil fuel dependence cannot only be a diversification of sources, which does have a very important role in managing the transition, but the ultimate solution needs to be renewable energy as the dominant in our energy systems. Finally, the increase in wind and solar energy will also require new infrastructures, including undersea connections. Estonia and Finland have quite recently experienced the outage of the Baltic Connector gas pipeline, which once again demonstrated the need to make critical infrastructure more resilient. As future energy systems will be much more decentralized than now, and not every single connection can be manned with 24/7 surveillance, we would welcome if IRENA could in the future present some practically viable solutions to boost the resilience of energy infrastructure. And one last point, in the future energy system, we will need to better tackle energy poverty. According to the latest figures, more than 40% of people in Africa don't have access to electricity, most of them in sub-Saharan countries. We should make universal access to electricity and clean cooking a priority issue during the clean energy transition and find ways in IRENA to support that goal. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. Katrin, you raised the point about Africa. We have Ethiopia, Guinea, and others around the table, and it remains a black eye for our global society. I think in the 21st century, we have 675 million people without access to electricity on a daily basis, which is pretty extraordinary in itself. Mr. Frederick Wisselink is the energy envoy for the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Policy for the Netherlands. I'll be at the World Energy Council in Rotterdam. I'm sure I'll see you there. Please, you have the last remarks, and then we'll pass it to Mr. Gomez to conclude. Thanks.
Thank John for guiding this discussion. Really was. Okay.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you to make the last remarks of the day from the audience. I will be very short, but first, thank you for the presentation. I was watching it, and well, it gives me some hope to the comparison with the fossil fuel area and the renewable area we are entering in, or in the middle of. It is quite give me some optimistic feelings because the dependency in the fossil fuel area is much more than in the area we are entering. So this is very good message, and I really want to call upon everybody not to address energy security and renewable energy, the energy transition, as separate policy issues. They are two sides of the same coin. So more renewable energy is enhancing our energy security. Let's take that as a starting point from now on. Just two short remarks on increasing of renewable energy and building green partnership. Well, increasing renewable energy, we all are on that road. Building green partnerships across the world is the next step. We have to create new partnerships. They are more equally divided across all regions in the world. For the Netherlands, it means partnerships on green hydrogen. We are very, very well placed. Within Europe, it was shown on the map. We are the entry point of green hydrogen in Europe. We can divide it across Europe. This is an example of the new dependencies and the new green partnerships. And finally, within Team Europe, we are working on, also in the Global Gateway, the EU Global Gateway, to enhance these new green partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you again for the contribution. And I think even the IRENA report on geopolitics of energy could serve as good data points for next week, I think, right? Because it's at the core of the conversations in Rotterdam. I'd like to pass over to Mr. Gomez. I think we have one more contribution gladly from Africa and Namibia. Is that correct?
Thank you, John. Thanks for guiding the discussion, and thank to all the participants of this discussion. I would like to invite His Excellency Ms. Cornelia Chilunga, Nambian Deputy Minister of Mine Energy, to share the reflection. Excellent. The word is yours.
Thank you very much. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the invitation and congratulations to IRENA and Madam Elizabeth Press in particular for the report. I would also like to thank IRENA for an insightful work on this topic and all who have offered their perspectives and insights on the topic. It has been an incredible, rich discussion. Allow me to highlight some of the messages that have emerged. Every country is unique with its needs and has some form of renewable potential which can enhance its energy system resilience. Harnessing domestic renewable resources potential can have a manifold effect. It can increase energy autonomy and resilience, decrease import dependencies, and therefore minimize vulnerability to geopolitical and fuel price shocks. As the share of renewable increases, more systemic changes emerge. This in turn means that energy security also requires multi-dimensional thinking. We reflected on context in different countries and regions, underscoring how important it is to tailor solutions to local situations. There is an opportunity to proactively shape this system so that the energy security considerations are integrated from the outset. For instance, developing countries can play an important role in diversifying supply chains to make them more resilient. As infrastructure is modernized and expanded, we have to consider issues such as flexibility, cross-border trade, and demand, as per the presentation by Madam Press on the report. Efficiency, for instance, can be a powerful mechanism for energy security, and climate change impacts which we already experience need to be systemically integrated in energy security plans, given the expose of the infrastructure. Ladies and gentlemen, before I conclude, I would like to share the Namibian experience. My country. Namibia stands at the forefront of this challenge, intricately tied to the uninterrupted flow of resources. With our reliance on petroleum and electricity supply from the region and beyond, any disruptions not only escalate energy prices, but also impede socio-economic progress. Elevated price strain household budgets, exacerbating inflation and restricting access to vital services. Yet, Namibia holds immense potential. We are endowed with abundant renewable energy resources. We possess the capacity not just to meet our own energy needs, but to contribute significantly to global energy security and combat climate change. Exploring innovative pathways, such as exporting renewable energy in the form of green molecules of hydrogen, presents opportunities for forging mutual beneficial partnerships. Embracing renewable energy not only eases geopolitical tensions, but also stimulates economic growth and safeguards the environment. However, this transition necessitates collaborative efforts from governments, industries, and civil society to foster a robust and inclusive energy ecosystem. Namibia recognizes that geopolitics of energy security underscore the urgent need for a paradigm shift towards renewable energy solutions. As we confront the challenges posed by supply disruptions and geopolitical tensions, renewable energy emerges as the cornerstone of a sustainable and secure future. By harnessing the vast potential of renewable sources, we can mitigate the risks associated with dependence on fossil fuel and create a more resilient global energy landscape. Through international cooperation and strategic partnership, we can leverage renewable energy to not only address immediate security concerns, but also promote economic growth while forging ahead with industrialization agenda and contribute to environmental sustainability and geopolitical stability. Let us therefore commit to embracing renewable energy as the cornerstone of our collective efforts to navigate the complexities of energy security and build a brighter future for generations to come. That's the end of the Namibian experience. Getting back to the reflection, I would then like to inform that I will share the summary of our discussion to the Assembly plenary tomorrow, ensuring that we capture the momentum for future deliberations. And I would like to thank you, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for the reflection. Thank you for all for the positive and constructive dialogue. This concludes our consideration of Agenda 12. Thank you.
Check, check, mic check. 1, 2, 3, 4. Checking over for 1, 2, 3, 4.
Good afternoon. Can you please get to our seats so that we start?
Yes.
Is here.
Hold on, Joseph.
Hi. Hello.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I now invite the Assembly to turn to Agenda 14, Infrastructure for the Energy Transition, Utility for Net Zero Alliance. The Assembly has before it a background document with the same title, contained in A/14/EN/5. Central to the energy transition are advancement in power grids, requiring modernization for efficient integration and diffusion of renewable energy, and the establishment of robust hydrogen infrastructure, including pipelines, ports, and storage facilities, essential for the use of transport of green hydrogen. This Ministerial Roundtable on Infrastructure for the Energy Transition, Utilities for Net Zero Alliance, UNESA, will serve as a platform for discussing the acceleration of net zero in the future, in light of the recent formation of Utility for Net Zero Alliance at COP28. The session will facilitate discussions among industry leaders, policymakers, and stakeholders, focusing on the development and optimization of essential infrastructure for the energy transition. I would now like to invite the Director General for his introductory remarks. You have the floor, Director General.
Distinguished Excellencies, leaders of our global utilities, dear guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor to welcome you to this Ministerial Roundtable on Infrastructure for the Energy Transition. Today's discussions hold profound significance as we collectively start the course toward a sustainable energy future. The outcome of COP28 has underscored the urgency of our shared mission. The commitments to triple renewable power capacity and double energy efficiency by 2030 represent ambitious yet essential milestones along the path to net zero emissions. This translates to an ambitious target of reaching over 11 terawatt of renewable power capacity by 2030, and this according to IRENA's Tracking COP28 Outcome Report. And of course, we cannot overstate the utility sector's pivotal role in achieving these goals. However, achieving this ambitious target requires a fundamental transformation of our energy infrastructure. IRENA's seminal report, Tracking COP28 Outcome, the Breakthrough Agenda Report 2023, and the World Energy Transition Outlook provide insightful analysis and a robust roadmap. They emphasize the need to build the infrastructure necessary to accommodate new renewable energy production center, evolving trade partners, and changing demand locations. This includes modernizing and expanding electricity grids, integrating storage solutions, and ensures grid resilience. In this regard, I applaud the launch of the Utility for Net Zero Alliance, UNESA. This initiative stands as a testament to the sector's growing recognition of its responsibility and transformative potential. UNESA offers a vital platform for international cooperation, knowledge sharing, and identification of solutions to overcome existing barriers in the energy transition. I am inspired by the 27 leader global utilities and 5 partners organizations that have joined the Alliance. It's a recognition that achieving our climate goals requires unprecedented collaboration. I invite utilities from all IRENA members to join the Alliance. The private sector, with its control of grids and power assets, holds immense potential to accelerate this transition. UNESA, hosted by IRENA, represents a powerful convergence of expertise ready to drive tangible progress within the energy sector. This alliance will champion the build-out of clean power, modernization of the grids, ensuring our power system possesses the flexibility and resilience to accommodate a high penetration of renewable generation. Energy efficiency is a fundamental imperative, and UNESA members will prioritize solutions that minimize waste and optimize the value derived from each kilowatt hour. These industry leaders understand the necessity of decarbonization. They will spearhead investment in energy infrastructure, clean energy capacity, and new technologies, systematically phasing out reliance on fossil fuels. The industry electrification offers a transformative solution, and this initiative will explore its potential to reshape sectors traditionally burdened by emission-intensive practice. UNESA aims to address common challenges and barriers that stand on the way to tripling generation capacity in their respective country. UNESA will deliver coordinated action directed towards catalyzed breakthrough essential for a sustainable energy future. Crucially, this company will engage policymakers in a collaborative effort, advocating for regulatory framework that accelerate and support this critical energy revolution. Let's champion these utility giants, recognize that their alliance is not just another corporate endeavor, it is a sign of a brighter, more sustainable tomorrow for us all. To realize UNESA's full potential and leverage the opportunity identified by IRENA analysis, we must therefore prioritize infrastructure, policy, workforce development, and institutional reform. This requires streamlining regulatory framework, channeling targeted investment, and rapidly upskilling the workforce to meet the demand of the transformation energy landscape. UNESA's success depends on addressing key challenges, mobilizing helpful low carbon capital, mitigating supply chain risk for clean energy technology, and crafting supporting policy environment. To overcome this obstacle, UNESA will engage in close collaboration with IRENA, the UN Climate Change High-Level Champion, TACA, and SSE as the 2 co-chairs of the Alliance and strategic partners. This will enable vital knowledge sharing and facilitate critical public-private consultations for success. So, ladies and gentlemen, the energy transition is not just a technical challenge. It is a collective endeavor that requires sustained commitment and collaboration from all stakeholders. The leadership demonstrated by the utility sector through UNESA is a powerful signal of the industry's commitment. By working together, mobilizing resources, and implementing the action outlined in the veto and the UE consensus, we can achieve a sustainable energy future for all. From its launch a month at COP28 till today, UNESA has developed a strategic roadmap and plans of action directed at improving international collaboration in the power sector, contributing to tripling generation capacity by 2030 and reaching net zero by 2050 at latest. I'm confident that with the combining expertise and unwavering resolve of the utility sector, governments and international organizations, we can unlock the full potential of UNESA and transform the vision of net zero future into reality. Thank you very much for your attention. Back to you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Director General, for your remarks. I now invite Mr. Jassim Tabet of TACO and co-chair of the Utilities for Net Zero Alliance to deliver his address.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, IRENA Director General, Mr. Francesco Lecamari, for the opportunity to address the Assembly today and for the ongoing support of this initiative. Also, I'd like to thank the Utilities Net Zero Alliance members for their commitment towards navigating the energy transition in a collaborative manner. The whole idea of the Utilities for Net Zero Alliance was born during the World Utilities Congress in May 2023 in Abu Dhabi, where fellow CEOs identified an urgent need for collaborative action in this industry. Post this, the Utilities for Net Zero Alliance was officially launched during COP28, where the members signed a declaration of action with a clear objective to strengthen the cooperation within the power sector and align behind the agreed goals during COP28 to triple renewable energy capacity and double energy efficiency gains by 2030. Since then, the Utilities Net Zero Alliance members have been working extensively and closely together along with IRENA to develop a tangible roadmap and action plan with an initial phase covering for the next 2 years, which will be presented in some detail by IRENA today. Also, I'm just taking a step back and maybe just setting the scene a bit. Just before COP28, the International Energy Agency said by 2040, the world would need to build or replace 80 million kilometers of power grids globally. That's equal to all the grids we have today. In other words, this means rebuilding a power system that took 100 years in less than 1/5 of this time. Also, I'd like to highlight that it will require an annual grid investment to nearly double by 2030 to over $600 billion per year, after roughly a decade of stagnation at the global level. On a separate note, despite the challenges associated with the grids, the utilities community continues to invest heavily in renewables. For instances, the Alliance members collectively reaffirmed their commitment to increase the combined renewable capacity to 750 gigawatts by 2030. And that is close to 2.5 times their joint capacity today. I'd also like to emphasize that we need to do more than that. We need a Marshall Plan for power infrastructure development. And that is not an exaggeration to say that we literally need to rewire the energy system today. Also, I'd like to highlight that this plan is an ambitious plan, that we cannot achieve it unless we do it collectively. And that is why this kind of alliance is a first step and a key step in doing that. So, can the UNESA or the Utilities for Net Zero, how can the Utilities for Net Zero Alliance help? I'd like to remind everyone here that the members have collectively put forward an action plan aimed to addressing the key challenges the sector is facing. I'd also like to share that the key focus areas of the plan over the next 2 years will be around building up a reliable and flexible grid infrastructure, given the urgency and the high complexity and the high ecosystem impact around it. In addition to building out clean power, which are both strongly interconnected. Also, I'd like to highlight, to solve the main challenges related to the expansion of the power grids all around the world, the Alliance will take concrete steps across 3 pillars. First, working with supply chain partners to enable them to expand production to ease the current capacity constraints. Secondly, working with policymakers and regulators to ease the gridlock in many parts of the world when it comes to the permitting process and to make it easier. And finally, working harder together with financial institutions to mobilize capital. In summary, I'd like to highlight that the efforts, as per the action plans, are just the beginning. This is a challenge for the whole world, and it requires a collective action across industries and governments. And we are proud for TAQA to stand alongside our peers from across the global utilities industry and this alliance. And I would like to also emphasize that collective action as an industry can and will make a difference. So to conclude, thank you everyone for all of the support that we've received.
Thank you, Mr. Fabet, for your remarks. I now invite Mr. Martin Iboth, Chief Commercial Officer of SSE and co-chair of the Utility for Net Zero Alliance, to deliver his address.
Thank you so much, and I'd like to thank IRENA for the opportunity to address the Assembly. I'd also like to thank my colleague and co-chair, Jazim Farbet of TAQA, and acknowledge everything in his address as powerful, cogent, and very relevant to all of us. I'd also like to acknowledge the work by IRENA and TAQA to establish the Utilities for Net Zero Alliance and build on the positive initial launch at COP28. We at SSE are delighted to be co-chair of UNISA alongside TAQA and to see such a diverse and accomplished group of utilities coming together to tackle the biggest problem of all. And I would echo previous comments about the significance of the Alliance and the work we have set out to do, but in the interest of time, I will focus my brief remarks on a specific work stream which is now underway on supply chains. For those who don't know us, SSE is a UK-based integrated utility helping drive the energy transition across all parts of the electricity value chain. We are predominantly active in the UK, and we have the privilege of owning legacy assets and being the custodians of some of the biggest prospects in the UK for net zero, and we are investing across the train in terms of renewables, transmission and distribution. We're in the midst of an investment programme through which we will invest well in excess of £40 billion over the next 10 years in renewables, but also in renewable enabling technology. As Jazim mentioned, flex grid infrastructure and also flex power solutions are going to be critical in this. And this has seen us building and having the privilege, actually, of building as much offshore wind farm as anybody right now, including the largest offshore wind farm in the world at Dogger Bank. And that offshore wind, which has been a major success story in the UK, has also been the engine behind its achievements in decarbonising its power sector at a decent rate. And there are many positive lessons to take from this, including the value of long-term government commitments enshrined in good law and innovative policy mechanisms to de-risk investments and lower the cost of capital. There is, however, a cautionary tale. Despite leading the world in offshore wind within the UK, this is not necessarily leveraged enough to be able to build domestic supply chains due to the slightly piecemeal nature of auctions and perhaps the overemphasis on short-term marginal cost rather than wider value. And for us all to achieve our ambitions, this just simply can't continue. We know that building a resilient, sustainable supply chain will be critical if we are to achieve a trebling of renewables by 2025. That is why UNESA is focusing its early attentions on this very issue, and I'm delighted that we are looking at publishing a paper outlining a series of practical recommendations to policymakers. And particular thanks should be mentioned to Hitachi Energy and the GRA for their efforts in helping this. If I may end on a note of optimism, we can already see change coming, some of the change Jazim has mentioned. On grids, just such a key enabler of trebling renewables. In our markets in the UK, for example, we're seeing a much longer-term anticipated regulatory package, more strategic in its nature, being set out in a more planful way. And this long-term certainty is giving key supply chain partners the visibility they need to invest in new facilities. On offshore wind, we're seeing governments around the world taking a more holistic view of wider energy system and socio-economic value when designing their auctions. And we hope that these trends continue and accelerate, and along with all of our shared commitment to trebling renewables by 2030, will act as a critical catalyst for supply chain investments, and that the recommendations we're collectively setting out will make a meaningful contribution to that effort. I thank you for listening to me, and I thank you for your time. And I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peebles, for your remarks. Before I give the floor to Mr. Gonul for the sun-setting presentation, I would like to draw your attention to the screen where a video will be shown highlighting challenges and opportunities to collaborate on energy transitions, tripling renewables, and doubling energy efficiency. I would like now for the video to be shown. Thank you for the video. I now invite Mr. Kunul, Director of Country Engagement and Partnerships at IRENA, to deliver a sun-setting presentation.
Thank you, Chair, distinguished ministers, Commissioner, members and partners of UNESA, dear guests. So it's really a great pleasure to be here with you today and set the scene for the discussion by providing a bit more details on the alliance. Accelerating the energy transition is an urgent task that requires radical action and extraordinary levels of international cooperation. UNESA is an international platform for cooperation among entities operating within the power utilities ecosystem to address and overcome common barriers to the realization of net zero ambitions and near-term emission reduction targets. International cooperation and enduring partnerships with all stakeholders are essential to accelerate the transition towards net zero. IRENA hosts the Secretariat and fully supports the UNESA together with UN high-level climate change champions, as well as TACA and SSE as the two co-chairs of the alliance. 34 partners, including 28 global utilities and power companies that collectively serve around 300 million customers, united for a landmark joint commitment to advance electrification, renewables-ready grids, and clean energy deployment in line with 2030 breakthrough goals and a net zero future by 2050. Today, UNESA launches its roadmap to 2030 and beyond to address key challenges and expanding impact beyond UNESA in 3 key steps. Accelerate the transition through stronger international collaboration in power sector, collectively contribute to tripling renewables power and doubling energy efficiency by 2030, and reach net zero emissions by 2050 at the latest. The members of the UNESA have individual plans that collectively aim at achieving a joint target of 749 gigawatt of renewables to be deployed by 2030, which corresponds to 2.5 times increase compared to their current installed capacity. This significant target is impressive, but still falls short compared to the pledge on tripling renewables. I hope that today, during our discussions, we advance our collective thinking. What must be done to support UNESA members on the tripling target? Moreover, system operators within the UNESA membership are committed to significant investment programs to reinforce, digitalize and modernize the grid infrastructure, at least in line with the global benchmark of doubling by 2030. The members aim to significantly increase investments in grids, which would require strong cooperation among different stakeholders. Within this year, a number of specific quantifiable additional targets will be defined. Having such global targets is important, but we also have to be aware that country level and regional differences are significant, thus delivering local solutions, tailored solutions are crucial. Here shows the priority challenges of UNESA for 2024-2025 across the key sector, key focus areas and pillars. In the next 2 years, the focus will be on build-out of clean power and reliable and flexible grid infrastructure along the key pillars to facilitate policy and regulatory support, mobilize capital, and the risking of supply chains, and improving capabilities and skills. UNESA will follow a 2-step approach to accelerate the transition towards net zero by building the fact base on what needs to be done and then driving corresponding actions within the alliance and implementing projects on the ground. Aligned with this approach, UNESA today published on its website a detailed plan of actions for 2024-2025. It aims to support 2030 energy transition ambition through their global infrastructure program that will drive grid infrastructure investments to support tripling and beyond by 2030. The focus will be to drive supply chain capacity expansion for grid development and ease constraints, engage policy and regulatory community to ease bottlenecks and simplify permitting, mobilize capital to modernize and build out infrastructure for the energy transition. The UNESA plan of actions will lay the foundation for the needs of the future energy system, focusing on grids and the key challenges it faces while increasing clean energy capacity. UNESA's actions will build on various initiatives implemented by its members and partners. UNESA has been working on detailed high-level statement on building a resilient and diverse clean energy technology supply chain that will be published soon. Today, I would like to share with you some key messages and recommendations from that statement. I will focus on some of the key recommendations in each specific area of grids and renewable energy technologies. On power grids, it is important to have a functioning global supply chain, manufacturers of critical grid technologies to leverage their resources across the world. Longer-term strategic power system plans developed on a regional basis are required. Bringing a shift from single project approvals to multi-projects and permitting approvals are extremely important. Any disruptions to land, sea, or air infrastructure, such as due to changing climate conditions or geopolitics, will create a ripple effect across global supply chains. For wind energy, regionalization is one of the key issues to support growth and resilience while maintaining a globalized wind supply chain. For solar energy, resilient, diversified, and low-cost global solar value chains should be developed as a priority to safeguard against market and price shocks. Value chain localization efforts must be tied to the need for globally integrated and diverse supply chains. When it comes to hydropower, UNESA is recommending to scale up a mature supply chain, decarbonize materials like steel and cement used to build hydropower dams. For energy storage, the industry calls that cross-sectoral and power systems harmonized investment needed along with the diversification of storage technologies and skill development. So let me conclude the presentation by saying together we can deliver and join our forces to build the fact base and foundation towards a net zero future. I take this opportunity to invite all IRENA members as their utility companies to join this powerful cooperation platform of UNESA. Thank you very much.
Thank you indeed, Mr. Gonul, for this insightful presentation. During the Ministerial Roundtable, we will hear insight from a high-level panel of speakers on the subject matter. The discussion will be moderated by Ms. Melinda Crane, lead moderator of the talk show To The Point. Ms. Crane is also a Berlin-based moderator and a political commentator with a background in law and economics. The panel discussion will be followed by member interventions. Let me now hand over to our moderator. Over to you, Ms. Berlin.
Thank you very much, dear Chair. Thank you also to Director Gonul for that very ambitious vision and plan of action that you've outlined. I'm getting out from behind this desk so that I can greet our panelists properly. And also say to all of you, dear excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us. It's a great honor to moderate this discussion. So as we've heard, UNESA is about collaborative action now to achieve that massive infrastructure buildup that was described by our opening speakers. And UNESA brings together a lot of power, and I do intend that pun. Nonetheless, this is not something UNESA can do alone, and all of our speakers have made that clear. When you talk about collective action, you mean also collective action between industry and policymakers. And we've tried to mirror that with our panel here today. We have leaders from both industry and government. Along the way, we got a few more policymakers, and it looks like we may have lost one of our industry representatives. But if we add the co-chairs from whom we just heard, we are nearly at parity. So at least when it comes to public-private. Where we're not so good in parity is on the gender side, but the Commissioner and I are going to do our best to take care of that. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our panel. We are running behind, as you can all see, so I'm going to say before we even begin, I'm very grateful if everybody can keep their answers short. We're going to do 2 rounds of questions about different stakeholder responsibilities, policy and industry, and then we're going to open the floor to pre-registered interventions. If we have time, I will also take non-pre-registered interventions, but I'm kind of doubtful that we will have time. So let me now introduce our panel, starting with EU Commissioner Kadri Simpson. She is Commissioner for Energy, responsible for implementing the European Green Deal in the energy sector. And seated next to her is His Excellency State Secretary Stefan Wenzel, State Secretary at Germany's Federal Ministry of Economy and Climate Action. Next to him is Excellency George Papanastio. He is Minister of Energy, Commerce and Industry for the Republic of Cyprus. It's also a pleasure to introduce Philippe Henry. He's Minister of Climate, Energy, Mobility and Infrastructure for the Walloon region of Belgium. And then next to him is Mr. Luc Raymond. He's CEO of the French power company EDF, and its subsidiary EDF Renewable is a major global player in the renewable sector. So welcome to all of you. Great to have you with us. And I'd like to try to tie together some of the things that you are doing with the messages that we have just heard from Director Gonul on the vision and plan of action of UNESA. And I'm going to ask, as I said, that everybody keep their answers brief, which means under 3 minutes, please. Very grateful to you for that. And if you can share concrete best practices and examples, that would also be great, because plan of action, of course, means right now. What are we doing? So, Commissioner Simpson, following the energy crisis, and you talked about this already a little bit in earlier sessions today, the EU put into place the Repower EU plan, along with a new legislative framework for supporting renewable infrastructure, and also the EU action plan for grids. When you hear what UNESA is telling us, what do you see as the most crucial aspects of those various instruments when it comes to achieving this kind of an infrastructure build-out?
Let me start also by congratulating UNESA for a very good action plan. And I think that it is important to map what is our starting position. So right now, entire existing global grid is 80 million kilometers long, and that means that if we want to accelerate electrification, we need to double it by 2040. And already now we are in this situation that worldwide we do have at least 3,000 gigawatts of renewable projects that are waiting in grid connection queues. So from European perspective, I can say that that electricity grid in Europe is more resilient and flexible than any system across the globe. And we do have a very dense network of 11 million kilometers. But we are in this position where we will also electrify sectors which were until now heavily dependent on fossil fuels. We have to make it possible to replace Russian fossil fuels with alternatives, greener alternatives, and that means that despite the fact that so far grids are a true European success story of integration and cooperation, we need to expand our grids, and 2/3 of investments will go to the distribution side. So 40% of our distribution lines are older than 40 years old, and we will electrify the heating sector. We will bring online electric vehicle chargers, so this is a massive challenge. And we have organized our action around 3 actions. I think that it is most important that we have to address 2 main issues in parallel. First, the significant ramp up of grid technologies production, and second, deployment of grids so that infrastructure investments go in parallel with renewable deployment. And for that, we presented our GREET action plan. This consists 14 very concrete actions that we have to deliver within 18 months, so very short time frame. We also addressed in our Net Zero Industry Act some key technologies. And I think that it is very important that this is not only about renewables, wind and solar and geothermal, but it also includes GREET components because this is one of the bottlenecks now. And then, of course, we revised our framework for trans-European energy networks, just to connect our own member states, but also our neighbors. And that gives them also a boost to bring online more renewables because they know that there is a market case. And my last comment is that you don't see many energy ministers from European Union around the table, but just this Monday we had an informal meeting, 27 ministers were there, and we dedicated a day and a half discussing exactly the challenges that we are faced in infrastructure side of our energy policy.
We do have one of those European energy ministers at the table today, and in fact, he'll tell us about it. One of the biggest important projects of common European interest there is working on the kind of interconnectors that you described. But first, I'm going to go to State Secretary Wenzel, and Germany aims to generate 80% of its power from renewables by 2030. That is quite a short period of time. Your minister, Robert Habeck, has said that grid expansion is going to be absolutely key to achieving that goal. What exactly is your government doing to accelerate the needed infrastructure build-out in this very, very short time period? And what do you need from other key stakeholders?
Yeah, thank you very much, Melinda, for this question. We are working on the grid, on our infrastructure since 10 years, and now we want to go faster ahead with our grid because it has a crucial role for energy security and to implement 80% of renewables. And for example, we simplified and facilitated the permitting process of building infrastructure and grids. An example, the deployment of renewables now is by law of overriding public interest. That's one point. And we have a quite clear plan for the expansion of transmission lines, but also for the strengthening of the distribution grids. And we clearly monitor progress in grid expansion. And that's a huge challenge, but we are working also on digitalization of the grid. That is a very crucial point too. And we invest into all kinds of flexibilities, be storage or demand-side measures, using the storage option of electric vehicles or the storage option of heat pumps, because every heat pump, for example, comes with a storage of water, so we can use it in the midday when we have a lot of sun. We take the sun and store it in the water storage of the heat pump, use it in the evening, and so flexibility is very important.
Thank you very much. And I'm glad you mentioned the designation of renewable energy projects as projects of public interest, because we're talking right here about collaboration between policymakers and industry, but bringing the public along is obviously very, very crucial indeed, because massive amounts of taxpayer money will be spent to achieve these projects. And so with that, I will now go to Cyprus, which in fact is a country that is looking to spend quite a bit of public monies on a new interconnector. You mentioned it in the earlier session on the geopolitics of energy. Cyprus is advancing what's now called the Great Sea Interconnector. It started out as the Eurasia Interconnector that is essentially a 1,000 megawatt undersea cable that will connect Greece, Cyprus, and the Israeli power grids. And as I understand it, that remains an important project of common European interest as it began under the Eurasia name. So tell us how you see your government's role in ensuring that this project goes forward in particular, and also in accelerating that build-out of infrastructure in general.
Thank you, Melinda. Before I go to the interconnection, I would say that Cyprus has an isolated energy system, and without any electricity interconnection so far to any other country, that creates certain difficulties for the penetration of renewable energy sources. You understand that it's a very niche market, so whatever we produce, we need to consume it. Cyprus is sitting in the middle of the Mediterranean, or in the very east of the Mediterranean, with a very high solar dynamic. So you understand we are blessed from that point of view, so that we can make use of the renewables, and more specifically solar. On the wind dynamic, Cyprus is not so blessed, simply because we don't have the high winds, even offshore. So electricity interconnection, which is your question, generally are vital in managing the intermittent nature of renewable energy sources, and boost the security of energy supply. Additionally, electricity interconnections allow cross-border access for new producers and suppliers. In fact, what we are trying with the interconnector, the new name is Great Sea, as you very rightly pointed out. It's a project which connects Israel, Cyprus, and Crete. And Crete is already connected with mainland Greece, and mainland Greece with the rest of the European electricity grid system. It's a very ambitious project, simply because not only is 879 kilometers between Cyprus and Crete, it is also laid, the cable, it's laid at the depth of 3 kilometers. 3 kilometers depth, so you need specific technologies in order to deliver such projects. And in fact, there is one company that produces such cables, and this company on its own cannot deliver the cable for these depths, and this cable needs to receive an extra technology in another country, namely in Japan, in order to get the cable ready to be laid at a depth of 3 kilometers. It's a 1,000 megawatt project, cable. It will increase the penetration of renewables in the country, but also it will create a system of electrons flowing from Cyprus to Crete, from Crete to Cyprus, or Israel to Cyprus. So Cyprus will be sitting in the middle of this electrons flow, which gives the security of supply that the country is looking for. But also the importance is the penetration of renewables.
Thank you very much. And let me go on now to Monsieur Henry, and a similar question to you, if I may, given that Belgium is well integrated into Europe's energy infrastructure and has set ambitious targets both for offshore wind and solar PV. How do you see the roles of different stakeholders, including government, in accelerating infrastructure build-out?
Thank you very much. First, I would like to fully support and welcome the recent formation of this Utilities for Net Zero Alliance, platform for discussing the acceleration of a net zero future among utilities can certainly play a role in unlocking their transition potential. I think the main challenge for public authorities to succeed in the energy transition is the financing of networks and interconnection of networks, micro networks, micro and macro networks, and financing of infrastructure on the one hand, and innovations, smart meters and so on the other end. The deployment of electricity transmission and distribution networks can be crucial for realizing our goals. A stable and ambitious framework is necessary to align also private investments with the energy transition. I think public investments could focus on building infrastructures such as hydrogen and electricity grids, as well as fostering innovation and upscaling of breakthrough technologies. And the main current problem is the speed at which the electricity network should develop to meet the growing demands on injection, connection of renewable productions, and the growing needs for electricity from electric vehicles and heat pumps. In Belgium, also, the main obstacle to accelerating the development of networks is the lack of manpower. That's an important point also to mention. And I also have to add the fact that energy efficiency is also very important. It's not only a prerequisite for the energy transition, but also make it possible to optimize infrastructure. So I think it's very important to have collaboration at international level and also internal level to facilitate such approach, such holistic infrastructure planning, information sharing between the various players across the sector, the energy sector and beyond is essential. The more information the network operators have about the client's energy transition plans, the more efficiently they can anticipate the necessary grid in the international connections and in the internal connections. That's why, for example, we have collaboration in Belgium between TSO and DSO, the grid and the transport grid also. And then to conclude that, like with this, I think at international level it's the same. We have to interconnect and invest the most quickly possible.
Thank you very much. I want to come back to hydrogen a little bit later on because I know Belgium has aspirations there. And I'm glad that you mentioned labor shortages, the shortage of skilled labor, because that in fact is a key issue here, and we will be addressing it tomorrow in a plenary. So I warmly invite anyone interested in that topic to join us tomorrow for our plenary. Let me come now to industry. We've heard about some different things that governments are doing. You at EDF have big ambitions for renewables and infrastructure build out. Tell us a little bit more about what you expect from governments, from policymakers. I know Director Gonal has covered some of it, as have SSE and Taka, but perhaps you can share your own point of view, as well as what you yourselves are doing at EDF.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. Well, EDF is indeed a utility, as its name since a long time. Not necessarily means everything everywhere the same word, but basically means that at least in 4 countries in Europe, we are delivering both generation and a commercial capacity serving customers, 30 million of customers overall. What makes us a special utility is that the power we deliver is over 91% low carbon already. And of course, we are delivering this 24/7. In these countries, plus operating in 30 other countries. The ambition of EDF, of course, is to go more in the direction of net zero, and as fast as we can. Today, we are at a level of 37 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour, and we ambition to be at 22 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour in 2035. To give you just a benchmark, in Europe, the average gram of CO2 is 251. So this is where we start from, but we want to go farther. There are many challenges, of course, to go in that direction, but the more you advance in the direction of net zero, the more you face systemic topics. And I think this is where most of our countries are now bound to, which is, yes, we need to add more of everything, but at some point we need to face the challenges of the system. And this is where we are. Electricity works as a system from generation to the usage. And we need to have a comprehensive and resilient system. And I just want to share a few elements and few ideas in this direction, very short. First, there will be more instability coming. The estimate we have is ×3 instability in the electrical system by 2030. We need to swallow this. Yes, we need more renewable. Yes, we need more grid. But once you have reached the level of renewable that can be swallowed by the demand at a given moment when you have production, you need to add dispatchable power, storage, and flexibility. And we need to work as much on these aspects. Yes, we need to work on the grid so that we can share more electricity across distances, but there are technical aspects which cannot be solved even with bigger pipes. Instability locally needs to be treated as well. So, in short, to answer to your questions, what do we expect from government? We expect judgment and balance, and also efforts to understand the physical dimensions of electricity that are more stubborn than any kind of law. They are physical laws. That's where we expect to give advice to the government and then to follow their steps. Thank you.
Thank you very much for reminding us of the importance of physics. Much appreciated. We now have a second round of questions. I'm going to ask everybody to try to keep your answers to 2 minutes, if you can, so that we can still take floor interventions. I think we hear the cocktail party gearing up outside, but let's forget that. Let's stay right here with UNESA and the matter at hand. So I'd like to take a deeper dive now on how we unlock the utility sector's potential to accelerate the energy transition, particularly by overcoming structural and financial impediments, all of which have been mentioned so far. And again, I'll begin with you, if I may, Commissioner. As we've heard, unlocking that potential does require a significant surge in financing for infrastructure. You reminded us this morning that many governments do face some pretty severe budget constraints at this time. What is the EU doing to leverage the financing that will be needed within Europe and beyond Europe, of course?
Indeed, even within Europe, we know that, that to build up our grid infrastructure, we need 500 billion euros only this decade, and it's clear that we cannot take it from consumers, we cannot add it to the tariffs. So some significant public support is needed. And we address this issue in our grids action plan. So there is a challenge how to build out grid that will connect future offshore wind farms with mainland consumers. Also how to connect our still isolated island member states like Cyprus or Ireland. And there is a challenge that we have to give a clear signal also for the subsea cable producers. Right now in Europe, they are producing approximately 1,900 kilometers, but we need 3,200. So this is one of the actions just to give predictability what kind of demand for their production is there. Another challenge is, and I very much agree that we do have impressive grid infrastructure already, but we need to smarten it, just to allow thousands, millions of small producers to become prosumers so that they will produce some for their own consumption, but will be able to sell it also to the grid. And for that, we also will give visibility for funding from EU programs for smart grids and modernization of distribution grids. So we do have different EU funds available, regional development funds, but I think that the latest edition came online with a plan that we wanted to address the COVID impact by bringing online additional financing. We call this Next Generation EU program, and there member states can use these funds exactly to strengthen the distribution grid. And on top of that, because we do believe that cross-border interconnections will allow us to bring more renewables online, and many member states and our neighbours will benefit out of it, but there is always a challenge who will cover the costs, because some member states might be the beneficiaries and others producers. Then for that occasion, we have created Connecting Europe facility, where we can also cover the necessary costs And now this facility is also open for our neighbors. So not only this project that will connect Cyprus with Israel, but also project that will connect Italy with Northern Africa, or even our Romania via Black Sea subsea cable towards Georgia and Azerbaijan. And by doing so also this vast potential of Caspian Sea.
Thank you very much. And back to State Secretary Wenzel. And we've heard it mentioned that, in fact, this grid build-out, it will look different from the grids of the past. We're going to have to see a lot more investment in distribution, for example, because of the decentralized and local nature of renewables. Again, massive investments are going to be required. Share some best practices about how Germany is trying to unleash the utility sector's potential to generate those kind of funding.
At one point we must see in the future, we will support with the grid also mobility, housing, sectors which are now living from oil and gas. And this grid had much more work to do in the future. So that's one reason, too, why we must invest. And the first is policy work. We must have a reliable framework. That is very important also to have bankability for the investment from private money also. And we need a reliable framework. That means every consumer and every company that produces renewable electricity can feed the electricity into the grid and receive remuneration. And grid operators should grid the grid in such a way that flexibility is supported and various storage facilities are well utilized, and then we can work good together with our neighbors in Europe, but also in North Africa or the MENA region in the future. And electricity prices for consumers must cover the cost of its production. That's it's an important point too for bankability. But with renewables, we can have a far lower cost in the future than with fossil fuels. And second, we need a planning security, a long-range planning security, and our new NDCs would be a part of this planning security because they determine what a country wants to do in the future. And then we must talk about financing, how we can use die-risk mobility, die-risk options in even in countries with very high interest rates, very high inflation or other economic risk. And we must see at social acceptance. Social acceptance is always a very important point.
Thank you very much for underlining that. Minister Papanastio, that Great Sea interconnector that we talked about comes with a pretty substantial price tag, of course. How are you working with private sector partners, including utilities, to get the kind of capital investment that you need?
Yes, the project, I would like to thank Kadri for providing it's a PCI, it's a project of common interest, so Kadri has been generous enough to give a few hundreds of millions on the project. The total cost is estimated at 2 billion, and for the Cyprus, the Republic of Cyprus is a small country. You understand that the financials are also small. However, the connection makes a lot of sense in terms of reducing electricity prices in the country. And the project promoter currently is IPTO, which is the transmission operator of Greece, will be out shortly in order to receive interest from potential investors. And one of the interested parties is also TAGA. We recently signed an MOU, which partly is binding, or it's a gentleman's agreement as well, that we will join forces in order to deliver this project of the 2 billion project. However, the value and the value is so high that I believe the project attracts already investors and utility companies as well. But it makes a lot of sense geopolitically because that particular interconnector goes as far as Israel, and you understand that there will be potential for connecting Europe with Saudi Arabia at some point in time.
Thank you very much. Minister Henry, I know that Belgium has aspirations to be a green hydrogen hub. So I wonder how you see the role of utilities in that endeavor. What are you looking for from them in terms of collaboration, and how are you incentivizing that?
Effectively, we are working on the hydrogen too, and it's directly linked to renewables, of course, because it's an objective of developing green hydrogen. That's why we have to organize the ecosystem about hydrogen. We are now we have organized a council in Belgium about hydrogen. We have projects in several ports, in Antwerp, in Liège, where we can have together some production, some consumption, and develop the facilities and the knowledge about hydrogen, because it's a completely new subject. So it's much work, and it's also necessary that the countries invest and support research and infrastructure. Of course, there are also the pipelines about that. So it's completely directly linked. But of course, we have together to develop hydrogen and electricity grid, because it will be together for making green hydrogen. And I wanted also to insist on the question of flexibility for electricity. The commissioner spoke about the prosumers, and it's in fact a very important subject we have at the moment in Wallonia, because the grid was not ready that far, and that's why we have to work on the flexibility for all producers and also consumers. And if we succeed in displace the demand in the time you consume electricity when it's produced, for the prosumers, but also for the other people, it will completely help the grid. So that flexibility on the electricity and the development of the new vectors like hydrogen, that are the main things on what we are working now.
Thank you very much. And to EDF, one last question before we open the floor. When it comes to unlocking the utility sector's potential in order to ramp up infrastructure build out, do you have best practices, examples that you could share? You don't have to name names of governments or countries or organizations, but are there particular examples where you would say this was really key, this really worked well?
Sure, of course. Well, I think, as for any company, what matters the most is the visibility of the conditions of your operations for the long run. So clearly, we are in most countries, we are operating in an energy-only market, which is quite unstable, with a lot of flexibility, a lot of volatility on the electricity price. This, as such, is a handicap for investment, because you cannot predict your sales output. So there are ways to handle that have been developed, notably in Europe over the years. I would like to congratulate the European Commission and the governments for coming together last year with an agreement which I think is a landmark, providing very strong guidance on going for the long run for the market, saying long-term trading is good, because this is providing stability into the market. That's step number one. Step number two is technology agnosticity. I think this is providing level playing field rules at the European level, which is helping the operators like we are to make steps into the right direction. And I would like also to give the example of the UK. Not anymore, it was mentioned already, not anymore in the EU, but nevertheless, we have a very good operation, very strong operation in the UK, where for the last years we have been developing very big projects together with a very collaborative approach on defining how we measure the risks and how we take the risks. I think that's the right direction to take and to move forward. And that's why, where in the UK, for example, we have the OK to build 2 nuclear power plants that are going to provide 7% of the needs of the country and balance all the efforts that we are also participating into renewables and offshore wind, for example. So that's, for me, that's the right way forward.
Thank you very much. Thank you also, everybody, for really keeping your remarks concise. Much appreciated. Nonetheless, we are still quite late. I will now open the floor to pre-registered comments, and I've grouped them according to the guiding questions that were circulated, and I think the table is more or less built in the order in which these are. And I'm going to just leave away names and only say countries or organizations so that we can maybe cut a few seconds off. Nonetheless, I'd be grateful if you could keep your remarks to under 2 minutes, please. And I will begin with the guiding question: what must be done by governments, utility industry, and key stakeholders to overcome existing barriers and rapidly advance solutions across infrastructure, policy, workforces, and institutions in the next 2 years? And I'll go first to Slovakia. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I would like to come back to the projects of the common interest, which are the cross-border projects with significance for the EU infrastructure. And in this context, we would like to point out 2 projects focused on the electricity grid development and 1 project related to the hydrogen infrastructure. Again, connecting networks, or the so-called ACON smart grids project, aims to foster the integration of the Czech and Slovak electricity markets, with aspiration to expand the interconnection of the markets in the region and thereby to improve the quality and security of supply in the border areas. The second is the Danube in-grid project, the objective of which is to strengthen interaction and integration between the Slovak and Hungarian electricity markets and to adopt smart grid technologies that should efficiently integrate the behavior and actions of all connected market users. Last but not least, the Central European Hydrogen Corridor, because there was not a lot of mentioning of Central Europe here. This is a project of gas transmission system operators of 4 countries, including Slovakia, with the aim of creating a hydrogen corridor in the Central European region. And also, to conclude very briefly, I would like to mention that apart from these big-scale projects, we see a meaning in providing investment aid also to lesser projects at the national level, applying the REPowerEU instrument. This way, we are supporting notably the project related to the modernization of transmission and distribution systems, new batteries, and hydrogen electrolyzers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Slight departure from the chronology. I will jump over to Marco Arcelli now from Aquapower, and you have the floor because you have to leave very soon. If others have to leave very soon, please put your signs up so I know to whom I need to go first.
No,
so,
thanks
Marco,
a lot,
please.
Melinda, for acknowledging this with the disruption. I need to really catch the last flight to Riyadh tonight. Aquapower, for those who don't know it, is a Saudi national champion for renewable energy and energy transition. We have 55 gigawatt of capacity. We're the largest private desalination company in the world, supplying about 20–30% of the population in Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, the Emirates, and Oman. And we're one of the first movers, or the first mover in green hydrogen with the Neon Green Hydrogen project and the second project in Uzbekistan together with partners. My remark is really on then what can we do or what should we do? And I would like to focus more on something soft rather than the hard of financing and grid integration and so on that we heard. And I take the privilege of having moved from the global north to the global south. We operate in many countries in Africa, Central Asia, Southeast Asia. One of the things that surprised me moving to Saudi Arabia with Vision 2030 and everything that is going on in the Emirates with the big decarbonization projects that we have here, programs that we have here, but in reality is Uzbekistan. And I always take it as an example because I never would have thought moving from Europe, big utility, coming here and say, you know, what's the second biggest country in your portfolio is Uzbekistan, where we're investing $15 billion to deliver a decarbonization that will lower emissions and gas consumptions by 60% by 2030. And what I observe is really a few things. So the first one is speed. I always talk about not a trilemma, but a quadrilemma. So we have to add speed because we need to be fast.
How do you do that? What I see in these countries that are moving fastest is leadership, and leadership in two forms. The first one is to have a vision, dialogue with investors to really say what we need on both sides, and then taking quick decisions. And on the other, part of these quick decisions is to accept and allow bilateral discussions. So you have tenders, yes, to make sure that you have the right cost at the end, but you have bilateral discussions that allow you to first move fast, and second, gain a scale and give visibility about a scale to do much more than the individual project. We heard before about people and the need for people. What we have done, for instance, in Uzbekistan, is we supported a technical academy that is basically graduating 200 people every year in a country that is elevating, developing skills to operate the power plants and the green hydrogen plants. So that's the second thing.
Marco,
the third thing...
Sorry, I'm going to have to ask you to be brief.
Yeah, it's where I wanted to conclude, in fact, is how we bring everybody together, because financing is the other point, and working in the global south, we have a lot of countries with twice the population of Saudi Arabia and a total installed capacity that is one power plant that we build in 2 years. So why does it not develop? And I think here the point is how you bring everybody together. So DFIs, often the development financing institution, we see that they take tenures of 10, 15 years. Why should a private investor take 30 years? You're there to de-risk. We work with partners. I talk to European companies, to companies from the global north, and they can say, come and invest with us on the equity side. And what I see is, yes, but all our pledges are really to invest in OECD countries, not non-OECD. Why? Because the rating agencies are judging our cash flow, and if it is from non-OECD, then it gets discounted more. So how are we going to solve that? We're trying to be an enabler, and I think that it takes a little bit of leadership from each one of us to come together and try to make it work.
Thank you very much. Glad that you stayed long enough to share those messages. And finance, in fact, is a very crucial topic that we will be addressing tomorrow as well. Unfortunately, you'll be in Riyadh by then, so we wish you a good trip. I will now return to the other side and go to Spain. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you. I want to focus my brief comments on investment from a public sector view. And while speaking about infrastructure for the energy transition, I think I need to record, as I did in the previous roundtable, that Spain has benefited greatly from policies and actions adopted in the context of the European Union. I'm going to share with you two brief facts. For the last months, and certainly from last summer, we've experienced very positive results in the form of zero or negative prices during the central hours of the day in the generation of electricity. And of course that renewables in Spain exceeded 50% of electricity generation for the first time last year. Of course, this is very good news for private consumers and industrial consumers, but we believe it adds an additional challenge on the supply side so that investment decisions can continue to be made as before. So this calls for action on the part of the public authorities, at least from the point of view of electricity generators, to design instruments that provide incentives for flexibility, storage, and the displacement of generation to other hours where they can receive a remuneration that allows them to achieve minimum profitability. Of course, eliminating the risk of promoting renewable projects is not a question, but we understand that we must help ensure that investments in decarbonization continue, and for this we need concrete actions. I'm going to stress two particular actions. We believe that we need to continue to enhance and grow the weight of the renewable sector's value chain in the national industrial metrics, which is already fundamental in Spain. We believe this is one of the main positive impacts of the energy transition in any country, and certainly in Spain. And of course, we are willing to enhance partnerships with other actors in the value chain, whether national or international. We're very keen on that. And of course, it is essential that we ensure that investments in the electricity grid, both in distribution and transmission, take place promptly, allowing the system to continue integrating new renewable energy. And we're confident in the tools that we are designing and will put in place as soon as possible to create incentives for renewable energy generators to continue to install additional renewable power. And I will give, finally, to conclude, perhaps some examples of the initiatives that are proposed to continue to grow the percentage of renewable energy in our energy matrix, enabling and strengthening bilateral power purchase and sale agreements, attracting demand to the central hours of the day where prices are zero or very low, increasing storage capacity, both centralized and distributed, to allow individuals and companies to shift demand, installing electrolyzers, finally, for the production of renewable hydrogen, where we believe that Spain can be a very relevant actor. I may just recall that 20% of all installed capacity in green hydrogen in Europe is based in Spain, and we will continue to make it grow with the help of partners. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll go straight to the Clean Energy Ministerial, if I may. And if everybody can shorten their remarks even more, that'd be great, because people are starting to have to get
Yes,
to their
and just to start by thanking IRENA and UNISA for inviting the Clean Energy Ministerial to this very important discussion. I think the short answer to your question, how can governments, industry stakeholders work to achieve this, is by working together. And this is a very good first step into it, because it's not just about talking to one another once in a while. It's about building those relationships to be able to, as EDF mentioned, get to understand each other. But most importantly, get to understand how they each bring a piece of the puzzle through the different levers they have to address the different aspects. And this is exactly what the SAM was developed to do, to build those relationships, to build those work streams that can start addressing the issues from all the angles of all the stakeholders. We cover all these aspects, transport, industry, power, but we also address different dimensions, whether it's the technology, the policy, but also the socioeconomic aspects, the skill sets, the inclusivity aspects. And what we try to do is to, A, build a dialogue so that we can identify all these issues, but more importantly, build the coalitions where the stakeholders can then sit down and develop plans to actually implement actions in all these aspects. And so what we've been doing is supporting political ambition through bringing concrete actions. For example, we helped the UAE's COP28 presidency to deliver on 3 of their priorities on hydrogen, on shipping, and on industrial decarbonization. We're now working with Brazil's G20 presidency to come with concrete outcomes to support their priorities, and one of them is specifically on the power sector and how to attract that green investments by looking at how the different stakeholders can all commit to working through the various SEM work streams on achieving aspects such as grid investments, smarting and modernizing the grids, storage, demand flexibility, demand planning and forecasting, but also issues of skills and so forth. So I think, in a nutshell, we have been building the partnerships. We're working with regulators, financial institutions, project developers, many of them around the table today, and we're very happy to have you and UNISA join us in Foz do Iguaçu in Brazil in October to see how we can bring the utilities aspect to the discussions as well.
Thank you very much. So, Director Gonul, I think an offer here from another collaborative endeavor on the policy side to join forces. I'll go now to Australia, if I may.
Thank you, Melinda. And I will keep this one short. Not just do we need to work together, but I think the key thing from a government perspective is we need to work together in a strategic and coordinated way. So across government, utility, industry, the whole clean energy sector need to be thinking about how we're really working it through the different investment issues, community issues, and the regulatory issues as well. Just a quick example on the coordinated way in Australia. So we have our Australian Energy Market Operator, and they do an integrated system plan. The latest one said we needed 10,000 kilometres of new grids, new transmission infrastructure by 2050. That triggered government to create a $20 billion fund called Rewiring the Nation. There's concessional financing to make sure the grid is being built with the least cost to consumers. So it's a direct result of working with our market operators, having a strategic plan, coordinating policy around it, and it resulting in a lower cost option going forward. But it's not just capital. We have spoken a lot about investment around this table. It is the social, the regulatory, the supply chains, and the skills. So we need to be working together with communities. It's not just on government and politicians to build social license. It's on all of us to make sure that those that are hosting infrastructure are on board with those projects. It's also about cooperating to work on the environmental frameworks, ways to de-risk the approvals processes, to reduce the bottlenecks. And so again, Australia is working with our utilities and other clean energy developers to make sure we streamline those processes. And then it's the workforce across the supply chain. So it's not just the electricians, it's not just the ability to build the grids, but it's that whole piece from the manufacturing all the way through to deployment and operations. But my final point is just on the needing to cooperate internationally. And for us, we have that focus on the Pacific and Southeast Asia. And I'm really honoured to be sitting with my Indonesian colleagues today in particular. Because we know in Southeast Asia there is insufficient grid infrastructure to see that build out of the renewables that's needed. And the ASEAN Energy Outlook notes that energy demand will likely triple in this region by 2050. So my call on this group today is to think about how you can be supporting the infrastructure needs in the Southeast Asia region in particular, because it's critical if we're going to achieve our climate goals. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Canada's chair appears to be empty. Is that right? Yes. So then we will go straight to Indonesia, which dovetails well.
Thank you, Melinda. In case of Indonesia is blessing with various distributed and abundance in terms of renewable energy resources so far. But the challenge is that we are the archaeological country. So the challenge is how to link between central of the renewable energy resources and the central of the demand. We have made two approaches on this. The first is to develop so-called super grid. And the second is to develop the industrial park, or even the combination between the first and the second. For the first one, the super grid development, we have made the roadmap on this. Last year, we have made the interconnection between inter-island in Sumatra, the western part of Indonesia. So the target is how to connect the 5 main islands of the country: Sumatra, Java, Kalimantan, Sulawesi, and Nusa Tenggara. This is the target up to 2050. Without having connection with these 5 main islands, so the target of the net zero will be impossible in our analysis in this part. So that's the first one. So we are connecting all those main islands. And the second part is to bring the industry to the area that renewable energy resources is available. For example, we made the green industrial park in northern part of Kalimantan. There are huge resources in terms of hydro with something like 10 gigawatt over there. Now it's being constructed for the first 1.3 gigawatt and bringing the industry, cementing industry to bring to this area. So the challenge for us so far is the regulation. Now we are trying to see, to have the breakthrough in general. This is not new probably in European countries or in some other countries, to have the power wheeling. This is the idea how to utilize the infrastructure, the transmission, to be developed by the private, and then also to utilize this. But by regulation, this is the challenge within us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now move on to our second guiding question, which essentially addresses a paradigm shift. We've been talking about a ramp up that is really unprecedented and requires a total rethink about energy and infrastructure. So I'd like to ask those who pre-registered comments to speak to that, beginning with the UK. Please.
Thank you very much, and thank you everybody for staying on. I wanted to start out with some positive thoughts about this. So believe it or not, 21% of the UK's power generation at this moment is coming from solar, which might surprise you, but of course solar in the UK is very distributed, and therefore you need to have good grid connections. We have made some big steps in the last year or so to try and slash the grid connectivity from 5 years to 6 months. 21% is not far off the 29%, which has been generated with the help of Masdar and SSE from wind. But we have 14% at the moment generated by nuclear, thank you, EDF principally, and 14% imported. So we have those big interconnectors, although maybe not part of the European Union anymore, but a lot of connectivity across the European Union overall, which means 67% of our energy at the moment is zero carbon. Not as much as Monday, when we hit a 19 grams per kilowatt hour carbon total, which was our record ever. So here's some really good news stories, here's some solutions, but that's the UK. And this needs to be it's a global problem, it's a global challenge, global solutions. So I want to just draw attention to two global initiatives which are really important for us to lean into, which bring governments and industry together. The first, both of them launched at COP26 in Glasgow 2 years ago. The first is the power breakthrough, which is really great that IRENA are now the facilitator of that, and that will help bring these utilities together, and I hope that UNESA will be a really key player in that power breakthrough. And the second, which my colleague Marcus over here will talk about later on, is the Greening Grid Initiative, which is a vehicle to bring together leading actors from governments, finance, regulators, and the private sector to deploy grids globally more effectively. Marcus himself is an example of public-private partnership, being from the national grid, but now having to move paper instead of electrons in government. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we go next to Denmark, please.
Thank you. So only 2 minutes. I'll try to do it in only 2 points then. First of all, I mean, Denmark is, of course, extremely committed to doing something extremely fast in this area. And I think the first thing that comes up is really barriers. And some of the barriers in our countries is linked to legislation. So what we've done there is basically been working extremely close with industry to find those barriers and get rid of them. So we set up this task force, which was really led by industry, and gave them the task to say, okay, find the barriers that are standing in the way of solar and wind deployment, and to get fossil fuel out of heating in houses. And they came up with a very, very long list, which they handed in a month ago, and now the government is looking at all of these suggestions, one by one, implement them to make sure that speed just go up. So that was the first one about speed and the barriers. The second one is really about risk. I mean, I think there's been quite a lot of discussion about sort of we need to de-risk all the projects, and in many ways, when people use the word de-risk, it means sort of move the risk to the government. And in some way, I think we need to be slightly more innovative. So for instance, we talked about the hydrogen. So there's just been a major political agreement 2 weeks ago about green hydrogen, the financing of the infrastructure there. And what was done was really trying to see how do we come up with a scheme where, of course, government steps in and pay the infrastructure, but it's done in a way where industry has to pre-book 40% of the capacity in the pipeline before it's even built. And by doing so, that sort of will allow the government to invest. And secondly, there's also been introduced a rather flexible way of setting the tariff, which would mean that the first, 10, 15 years, there would be huge deficits in these pipelines that would be paid by government, of course, on the premise that that money will be returned after the 15 years. So this way of sort of making sure that the risks are shared in a way which is not just transferred through the government. So those would be my 2 points. Really focus on getting industry involved in finding the barriers, and then find a new way to sort of share risk, and then have very, very quick rollout. Thank you.
Clearly, that is exactly what UNESA does intend to do, as we heard from the study. So thank you very much for underlining the importance of those. I go now to the Global Renewables Alliance, please.
Thank you very much, Melinda. Huge congratulations to the UK government for their solar power. It is surprising, but it's true what renewables can do. And also to the Spanish representative, again, congratulations for your initiatives on the negative pricing and curtailment. Love to talk to you afterwards about that. So the Global Renewables Alliance, we represent wind, solar, geothermal and hydropower on the generation side, and also long-duration energy storage and green hydrogen. And I welcome my friend Luke from EDF's comments about flexibility. Of course, we do need storage and, importantly, grids. We're a proud partner of UNESA. Grids have been ignored and undervalued for too long. They're indeed the circulation system, if you like, the veins of the energy transition. Commissioner Simpson mentioned there's 3,000 gigawatts globally waiting in connection queues, which would help us a long way towards the tripling of renewables. We need a massive increase in grids, both new infrastructure, but utilising existing infrastructure. So energy system optimization, no grids, always better than new grids. I'd also like to mention co-chair Martin Pibworth, your comments about value versus cost, not just for renewables, but for grids. There's a lot there, and it's extremely important to take that away. So we, as the GRA, yesterday, with IRENA, launched a public-private campaign called Time for Action, which focuses on 3 key enablers. And again, co-chair Yassim Tabet, you mentioned these. These enablers are the same for renewable build-out as they are for grids, which is financing, permitting, and supply chains. On financing, Director from IRENA, you mentioned this enormous increase required, 368 billion per year, this increase already this year to 720 billion, so a tripling of investment in grids. And as you know around the table, grid build-out takes longer often than renewable build-out. We need to start grids before the renewables. And the main reason for that is permitting. So permitting, especially high voltage distribution, transmission, requires social acceptance and a license to operate. And finally, on supply chains, and the GRA are very proud to be a co-author of the paper that UNESA developed on supply chains. And again, it mirrors exactly the challenges we face in renewables: minerals and materials, manufacturing, logistics, and, as mentioned, skilled workforce. So those constraints for supply chains of grids and renewables, and as you mentioned on the video, we can go far together, and I think together renewables and grids do need to work together for the energy transition. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. One last input now on paradigm shift from Siemens Middle East.
Yeah, thank you very much, Melinda, and thank you again for having me. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Utilities for Net Zero Alliance is really an unprecedented platform where utilities, technology providers, and governments are uniting globally to achieve net zero targets. To benefit fully from the global expertise at UNESA and to accelerate the energy transition, we must act on 2 crucial fronts, and Bruce, you just mentioned one of them. First, utilities must assess and maximize their existing infrastructure capability through methodological grid assessments, upgrades, and digitalization. Utilities can really enhance efficiency and extend their infrastructure's lifespan, contributing to CO2 savings. There are tremendous improvements that can be applied to existing infrastructure. Digitalization will enable the deployment of technologies like digital twins, which enhances grid control and sustainability, and also paves the way for AI, which will make grids even more reliable and efficient. But digitalization also yields its own danger too. It's a little bit overlooked, but extremely important that cybersecurity becomes a top priority. Preventing hacks and catastrophic blackouts must be built into any upgrades or also new infrastructure. And on the second front, UNESA must introduce a comprehensive roadmap for utility transition. This involves establishing standards and policies such as procurement standards, grid performance optimization, risk assessment, and also capacity building. It should also include the global phase-out of fluorinated greenhouse gases, such as sulfur hexafluoride, known as SF6 gas, in, for example, medium voltage switchgear. SF6 is one of the most potent greenhouse gases. It's 23,000 times more impactful than CO2 over a century. The technology to get rid of those fluorinated greenhouse gases in electric panels exists and can actually be deployed right now. So in conclusion, by assessing the existing infrastructure, implementing robust standards and also policies, and investing in grid upgrades, we can pave the way for a sustainable and resilient energy future. Siemens is proud to be a member of UNESA and is committed to contributing to the mission of achieving net zero emissions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. We now move on to our third guiding question. We still have 4 interventions left. We also have about 4 minutes left until past. It would be wonderful if we could squeeze these in to that amount of time, because then we would only be, so to speak, 10 minutes too long, since we started 35 minutes too late. So if you do all the math on that, then thank you very much. But anyway, our third guiding question is the following. What is required to unlock the utility sector's global energy transition potential to target and remove those structural, regulatory, and financial impediments that we have been talking about? And I will begin, if I may, with the Minister from São Tomé and Príncipe.
Thank you very much, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to express on behalf of São Tomé and Príncipe at this great event. In view of the challenges and barriers in the structural, regulatory, and financial context known to all of us, there is a need for less developed countries to change the paradigm in order to meet the real energy transition. São Tomé and Príncipe has invested in the training and capacity building of its staff in the technical, legal, and financial areas, in the preparation of studies that allow mapping of the potential in renewable energy sources, and also in the elaboration plan and strategies for short, medium, and long term. Also, focusing on the implementation of specific regulations, as well as the creation of measures that include tax and customs incentives to encourage private investments in renewable energy. I believe that in order to be successful in accelerating the energy transition, tripling renewable energy, it's necessary that the financing partners turn the procedures for accessing financing more flexible, less bureaucratic. We are convinced that through these actions, we will be able to unblock the barriers that hinder the global energy transition. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Over to the Green Grids Initiative, please.
Thank you. I won't waste much time about telling you about the need for grids. I think we've got that. But I'll just say there's no transition without transmission. What the Green Grids are working on, and we're working on 3 key areas which I think really will help enable the transition. One is around best practice, particularly around policy, regulation, and how we can share that from countries and organisations that are ahead of the curve to those that are further behind. We've developed a tool called the Electricity Transition Playbook, which is a guide and a training piece particularly for policymakers and regulators to help them navigate their own transitions and build holistic electricity plans. And I'd like to thank IRENA, who've been helping us with that. The second area we need to concentrate on is finance. It's been mentioned a few times. One of the things that we're working on with IFIs, MMDBs, is how we can bring greater access to climate finance for grid projects to help de-risk those, then to help attract private finance into those projects to make them more bankable, and particularly working in Global South regions to do that. And the third area I'd like to stress is supply chain and skills. Again, that's mentioned, but it's no good having the finance in place or the frameworks in place if you don't have the people to build, design, operate and run. And so we're very pleased to be working with UNETSA, IRENA and GRA on putting together an action plan around supply chains in particular to do just that. Because, to quote Bruce and GRA, the time for action is now, and there's no transition without transmission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now over to Enral.
So thank you. I just want to use the opportunity to talk about another project which might fit very nice to IRENA. Some of you might know this. It's the Global Power Systems Transformation. So what we have done over the last couple of years to see how can we bring the systems operators together. So we had a systems operator from many of countries here, so starting with the UK with the National Grid, Australia, AMEO, Ireland, Aerogrid, Denmark, EnergyNet, Calais in California, ERCOT in Texas. So the idea is we bring the systems operator together, link them also with some of the research organizations like Imperial College or NREL to really link this and see what can we do together. How can we change? How can we learn from each other? How can we exchange this information to accelerate the energy transition? So what GPSC does also works in countries like Indonesia, India, South Africa, Colombia, and Peru, Vietnam.
on control room of the futures, on best practices, how we change this, on workforce training. So we have some of the engineers coming to all our organizations and changing, and also smart inverters, just to name a few. So we see that this is very important. We talk about a lot of the policies, but also going into the ground, working with the systems operator, exchange what they've learned to really accelerate the energy transition. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the person I thought was the fourth is in fact not one of those who pre-registered a comment. So we will leave it there and wrap up our Ministerial Roundtable. Before we applaud for UNESA and for all those who have spoken, let me just attempt the very, very briefest of summaries. Our chair has left us, so it does fall to me, but the good thing is this is going to be extremely short. You know, we just heard there's no transition without transmission. I would say paraphrase that and say there is no transition without connections. And obviously infrastructure physically is all about connections. But what we've heard today is that it is crucial to interconnect policymakers and industry, utilities, those represented in this new alliance, in a pragmatic and effective way to remove barriers, to ramp up financing, to get the kind of legislative frameworks in place that can de-risk simply by providing stability and predictability, and of course to address issues like human resources. And when I think about connections, I also very much think about connections between the countries that are represented here and those countries of the global south that we have mentioned so often as needing so badly the financing that often flows to the global north and to the west. So that said, I would say I think we've had a very productive dialogue that established all kinds of connections, and I hope that we can continue in that kind of a fashion to make UNESA a success and to find those kind of partnerships and collaborative efforts that really bring this crucial project forward, because we will not get to the tripling up goal nor to net zero unless we have that massive build out that was described. So with that, I close the session with a very warm round of applause to all who have spoken here today. Thank you. Enjoy your evening. Hope to see you tomorrow.
For a picture.
Shall we? No, I just came to say hello to Mr. Thomas.
Yes.